Honeni Elohim, Honeni Elohim, Kehasdeha, Krov Rekameka Meke Feshai, Hasheva Lasason, Isheha, Hasheva Lasason. Days have turned into months, months into years, and after more than 300 years Yosef and his salvation of Mizraim have been all but forgotten. The cries and prayers of the Israelites now turn to the Holy One and his throne. Honeni Elohim.
Woo! Brother, come on, man.
Yeah. That was the surprise. That was the excitement. That is going to be the intro for the series.
All right.
Okay, so welcome. Any who are new or not so new to the Draw Nigh to the Creator series. Tonight, Jeff and I are starting our epic study.
Epic
Study of the first 14 chapters of Exodus. This is going to be a journey for any who are going to try to follow with us and walk this journey with us as we go all the way from the beginning of Exodus up until passing the Reed or Red Sea, depending on how you want to view that. We're going to try to give it our all, which is not easy for us. And it comes with a lot of weight on our own shoulders, trying to make sure that we, after every video, Jeff and I go, man, I wanted to mention this and I forgot. And I had this and I wanted. So we're going to try to get as much in as we can as we're feeling led by the Spirit. Are you ready to do this, Jeff?
I am ready to roll, brother. I tell you what, this is some good stuff. I am pumped. I'm hoping that I'm hoping our listeners understand how much we're going to be popping into this stuff. And guys, listen, go ahead and hit that share button. Hit it right now. Get it going. Get it out to people that you know. This series, man, is helping us prepare for Pesach, helping us prepare for Passover, and we want to impart to you what we have learned. We want to impart. Hey, I'm open to hearing some stuff from the comments too. Gosh, we have some great listeners. They also bring some great things to the table. But listen, we are excited about tonight. This is some game changer stuff tonight. I'm excited, man. I love the new intro too.
Yeah,
nice.
Oh man, I was we're taking the Hebrew there from Psalms 51, trying to view of what the prayers of the Israelites would have been like at that time. Have mercy on us, blot out our transgressions.
Yeah.
And that last ending there, right, is talking about the restore unto me the joy of your salvation.
Wow.
You want to talk about the prayers of the Israelites, and we felt like that was just like the perfect sentences. And my wife is not as studied and as common as to pronouncing Hebrew and stuff like that, so I thought it was going to be more of a struggle. But
she did good.
She was quick on it today, so I was real happy with that. And she put together all the images. So all the shout out goes to the wife there. She did the voice, the audio. She got the music rights for the background sounds. She got the rights to the images and the videos and everything. She did everything on that intro.
Well, that's all great. That is really good. That is really good.
I was telling her all week, I was like, man, it'd be really neat to get a really cool intro that sets the tone for this epic study. Because, you and I, we've done some intense studies, but I feel like this is going to be our most serious to date, our heaviest study.
Yeah.
But, okay, so before we start with Exodus 1, verse 1, should we perhaps just quickly...
We really need to set the tone and start with Genesis and kind of transition, I think.
Yeah. And this is why I actually wanted to this weekend, yesterday, wanted to do a finishing of the Joseph study so that's in people's minds. But I kept hearing to do perspective instead. And, Father knows best. So I went with that. But
yeah,
let me see if I can't pull up that file before I share the screen here with some images that you were talking to me about.
Sure.
But yeah, okay. So you want to catch us up here real quick, Jeff, on Joseph in Egypt.
Yeah. So we remember the story with Joseph. Joseph, his brothers sold him into slavery. He starts off with these dreams. He's having all these dreams where the stars are bowing down to him and all this. His brothers get all jealous. They're like, man, we're not bowing down to you. We're gonna do you in. So they dug a pit. They were gonna throw it. He fell in it. They're debating on whether to kill him. They say, let's not kill him. We'll make some money off this, right? And so they sell him off to some traders, and then a whole barrage of things happens. Not I don't want to get necessarily too much into that, but he's elevated. He is literally elevated. God used this traumatic experience, several traumatic experiences, if we will, and elevates him to second in command in Egypt. That's phenomenal. And we see that, so he's given favor. All of his brothers, they start coming up, except for Benjamin. They come up and they're like, hey, there's a drought. We need some food. Joseph's like, he pretends to be somebody else. And, it's this big reveal. It's this big thing going on. And man, God ends up moving Israel out of the land of Canaan and then comes into Egypt with Joseph's favor. Do we want to talk about where we believe they end up? Do we want to?
You talking about with the city of Avaris?
Yeah.
So Jeff and I were discussing before doing the show today about how much we want to touch on in terms of chronology, timeline. Who is Joseph? Who is Moses? Moshe, right, being the Hebrew of Moses.
Yeah.
Based off the Egyptian, actually. But
right.
Who are these two individuals in the secular history timelines? Because when you look at the Egyptian history, considering the positions that they had at that time of their lifelines, they would definitely be recorded. And so there is, for anybody who's listening who's not aware, for anybody who's maybe new to this idea, this study, there are umpteen amount of numerous views and interpretations and understandings and arguments as to who the Pharaoh was, what the timeline is. I mean, and most of it pretty much bounces around within a 200-year period, which for some of you might be thinking that's not a big deal, but it's kind of a huge deal. And there's all kinds of differing views on if the Egyptian timeline should be crunched together. There's views on whether or not certain parts of it is overlapping. You had two kingdoms of Egypt for a lot of the history of Egypt, not the entire time, but you have the southern and the northern. And this is often confusing, right? But it was the southern was considered upper because they had the higher elevation. They had the mountains. They were closer to Ethiopia, right? So you had the upper was southern Egypt, and then the northern would have been the lower Egypt. So just like with Israel and Judah, right? There are times where you had a split where you had the two different kingdoms simultaneously. So there are views that some of the Egyptian chronology might be overlapping a little bit on that. And so there's so much differing views on that. I think we're going to be hitting a lot more of that in the next video. There's a lot of arguments and things we want to bring up, but we will do a shout out to Patterns of Evidence Exodus. For anybody who's not familiar, Jeff and I are both big fans of that. From what I understand, we both have come to the same agreement. That doesn't mean that there isn't some things worth hearing on the other views.
Absolutely.
That's where Jeff and I currently sit, is in agreement with their understanding there. All right, so I found the three things. I've got a few. I don't even have an image of the outside of that tomb or anything like that. I don't know if you do, Jeff, if you want me to show that, but I've got a few pictures here if you want me to show them real quick.
Yeah, let's. So we know that like one of the last verses in the book of Genesis is where Joseph dies and he's buried in a tomb in Egypt, right? So that's where we leave off with Genesis. And some of the archaeological findings that we find in Avaris is this strange Semitic structure that has 12 pillars in it, like for the 12 sons of Israel, right? And then weirdly, it has a small pyramid tomb associated with it. And Ian, if you weren't a pharaoh back then, you didn't have a tomb built for you like a pyramid.
No, that's extremely uncommon.
Very uncommon. So here we are in Avaris, this it kind of in the same place as Goshen type thing, kind of in the same area where we see later the city of Ramses being built, kind of being renamed. And what a find! Let me see if I have you say I'm not sure if you have that picture.
I don't. I have the pictures I have right now is two of the statue that's inside the tomb, and then one that goes a little bit into detail of that statue. That's the ones I have saved here.
Yeah. So pull that up real quick, and then I'll.
Okay. I'm gonna need you to tell me, or the chat to tell me, how well you guys are able to view this here. Okay, going to share screen. All right. All right. Are you able to see my screen here? Okay. And then I'm gonna pull this up.
All right, and then I'll send you in a private chat. I'll send you the link where you
Okay,
can
so
see.
we have this one here. Are you able to see that?
Yep.
Now this is a digital remaking with the colors amplified, based off of the testing of the stonework of that statue. Notice that the robe that he is wearing is not a typical Egyptian garb. It's also colorful. He has a staff in his arm and his hand here, which again kind of indicates a shepherd-like position, along with ruler based on the arms folded and things like that. There's a lot of details that we're not going to be touching on tonight on this, and they go into a lot of depth in the patterns of Exodus.
Yeah. If you click on that link I sent you in private chat, and then you scroll down, it'll show you that that tomb area, kind of showing you with the house.
Okay. Let me.
But interesting enough, where you're showing this right now, I'll talk on that. The hairstyle, kind of a mushroom hairstyle, and this was totally not Egyptian at all for this period at all. And this was definitely something that would have one of the Israelites would have come up wearing. Again, the colors on the robe, the little, I don't know, little tool, weapon or whatever he has there in his hand.
Yeah, the flail.
The little flail. Yeah, that's definitely not Egyptian. So a lot of interesting stuff, and really kind of goes and shows. And I guess that's what I really wanted to start off with, is that we have historic evidence for Joseph being buried in a tomb in Egypt.
It was, and that's another thing that's interesting about this specific site, is that the tomb is empty, and the removal of the bones seems to be the only destruction of the tomb site. So it's not real common, unless you consider Moshe taking Joseph's body with him. All right, let me see if I can do this, and then see if that will. Okay, Are you still able to see the screen here?
Yep, yeah. And just scroll down. Hit the little cookie thing. And it's about halfway down the page. Neat little article, what they were talking about. There's another picture of that. Keep going. That's the
house. That's
the house. And you can't see the little split level there. The 12 pillars have been on the other side that you couldn't see. But that is a representation of the tomb that was actually found in Avaris. And again, guys, I can't stress how weird this is to see this. You didn't have a pyramid unless you were, unless you were super special. This is actually from the statue that they found, and you can see, guys, we're not making this stuff up. That you can actually still see the colors in the statue, for the robe. So, just amazing stuff. Yeah, that's bad.
Okay. Well, it's got the little video thing. Let me get rid of the.
There we
can
go.
see a screen within a screen within a screen there.
Yeah, there we go. We went to infinity and beyond.
But yeah, so there's all kinds of things surrounding the different speculations and theories, and a lot of it comes down to 1 Kings 6:1 on whether or not that should be considered literal, because we're given the time frame, and you can count back from Solomon, right? It's talking about the fourth year of the reign of Solomon, and it's well, here, let me pull up the verse real quick. I can just do that. Pretty sure it's 1 Kings 6:1. Came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign. Well, we have a pretty good idea of when Solomon's reign was. So you take that 4 years back, and then you go another 480 years back, and the understanding is that you'd be able to say, okay, that's when. Right. And a lot of people would see that and say, well, what's the question then? Well, then the issue becomes, is the 480 really just a reference of 40 generations, right? You have the 12 times the 40 and things of that. And so it becomes an issue of understanding the different views and interpretations of how things are worded in scripture, and a lot of it will come down to is if you can take it literal or is it being hyper literal to look at certain things. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff to this, and you know, kind of like how Dr. Heiser says, you know, he brings up pros and cons to all the different views. He's got issues with all of them, but he sees good in all of them as well. And it comes to the point where you're like, you know, it becomes this huge mess, you know, and at the end of the day, you end up feeling led or leaning towards one side, and that's what you end up going with. So Jeff and I lean more towards the patterns of evidence Exodus answer, not claiming that everything in that documentary answers every solution and that it's a hands down and there's no reason to question after, but that's where we're leaning, is that they got that right.
It's interesting though, if you look at it, just like modern people kind of discount the giants, they discount any kind of crypto zoology type things, and where the scripture actually talks about these things. And so it's almost, I don't know. I dig into it. I'm like, wow, this is really showing some stuff. So guys, if you haven't gone out and watched that Patterns of Evidence Exodus version, if you want to watch it, I know you can watch it for free on Tubi. That's an app that you can watch it for free on. I think there's maybe another one you can watch it on for free, but just do some searches on that. Great documentary. If you want to support them and help them out, you can purchase it. So it's some really good stuff. Fascinating work. The guys did a lot of work for it. So hats off to him.
Okay.
But, yeah, let's
so we all of that to say there is archaeological finding, there is evidence to see that Genesis and Exodus is not just some oral tradition fairy tale given on that you cannot see truth in. Anybody who's watching the show, typically the average person listening to the show, is not questioning those type of questions, but it should be said either way. So starting with Exodus 1, we're talking, and depending on the view, right, you have anywhere from 200 to 300. I wouldn't say 400 yet, because this is the birth of Moshe that we're starting with Exodus 1 here, right? Yeah. So we wouldn't be hitting what I believe would be that 400-year mark yet. This is Joseph gets to Egypt, becomes the second in command, much like Mordecai that we talked about in our Esther study. He gets his family to come down here, right? And they start there. So let's look at Exodus 1, keeping that in mind, right? Yep. So you look at Exodus 1, and it starts naming the children of Israel, right? Which came into Mitzrayim. First off, Mitzrayim, that word there is a plural. So again, it kind of gives that idea. And also you have the child through Ham, where you get that name Mizraim. So it kind of hints to some things in Genesis as well. Which came into Egypt, every man in his household came with Jacob, right? And then it lists his name and says, all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph and his 2 sons and his wife were already in Egypt, right? Now, often the picture is that Israel started at just 70 in their presence of Egypt, but that wouldn't actually be accurate, would it, Jeff? Because you've got servants, maidservants, manservants, you got anybody who would have tagged along, right? And you got to think this is during the time of when there's hardships and troubles throughout the land.
And they're leaving everything. When they're going down to Egypt, this is a massive famine throughout the land. They're not like, hey, we'll send some guys and you guys stay here and we'll keep that going on. But no, they're taking everything that they have down to Egypt. So lots of stuff going on. So I agree. I agree. I think there was a lot more than 70. Yeah,
I just wanted to say that. If you look at this language here, when it says all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70, when you see these are the names of the children of Israel, this is a callback to Genesis. These are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. This is a callback to Genesis. Now, we have our canonized Bibles, right? Or whether you have the Apocrypha in there or not, whatever. We know Exodus comes after Genesis. It's right there in the table of contents. As soon as you get done with Genesis 50, you flip the page and it says Exodus 1. But when you have multiple scrolls, right? And if you're new, right? And depending on what part of time and history you are in the past so many thousands of years,
right?
This is that callback. This is kind of like, when Matthew 1 starts out with Hebrew lineage. You ever seen those testimonies of Hebrews that become messianic because, they didn't want to touch that last 20% of what we consider the Bible because they've been told that is evil and that it's got this evil Messiah figure who hates Jews and is anti-Semitic and this, that, and the other. And then they actually read it for themselves. And I've seen videos that made me emotional, Jeff, where the guy says, I open up to Matthew 1 and the first page, there's nothing more Hebrew. And it's done in a Hebrew sense so that if you are tied and you understand those patterns, this is speaking that language. And there's many reasons for that. Well, what I'm saying is we're seeing that here with Exodus as well. These are the names of the children of this. This is a callback to Genesis.
Absolutely.
This is a connecting, a tying to, a callback. It shows that there is a continuance, right? That Yah is still doing what he promised. When you look at, he got the naming of the children of Israel here. As it seems to me, this is showing and re-emphasizing the promises of Yah to Abraham. Okay, because you see not only the names of Israel being mentioned, then it says, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied, waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Yeah. This is showing that Yah is continuing that promise that he said to Abraham. And and there's a lot of symbology too behind the number 70, isn't there? Usually 70 and then 72, depending on who sees what, but 70 that's mentioned here. There's some things to be said about that number, isn't there?
Well, and in verse 7, with that verse there, increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew exceedingly mightily. Whatever. That's the same verb usage in Genesis 1, 21, and 22, where it says they were fruitful, they swarmed and became numerous. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same Hebrew words, kind of going back to that. So again, the parallels that's going on. And just as a quick note too, for those of you guys that maybe have never studied this stuff, when Moshe wrote this down, it wasn't like in a codex form, like a book form. These were animal skins, and they would have just like, somebody would be like the keeper of the skins, right? They've just got them all bundled up, and they didn't write a number 1, a number 2, a number 3 on them. You just had to know where they went. And so that's why sometimes, especially like in the book of Numbers, we see things somewhat out of chronological order. But here, this is supposed to tie this in to Genesis, exactly what you're saying. Yeah. So it brings the reader back. It brings when they're expounding upon this, because every 3 years during Moshe's time and Joshua's time, they would go through and they would do a Torah cycle. And I think it took about 3 years for them to do a Torah cycle at first. Mm-hmm. And so this was to bring the listener back to that. Oh, wow, we were just, this is real familiar. We heard this in Genesis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It ties in, it re-emphasizes. You've got that like rote memory of being repeated, right? And we see this all throughout Scripture. Right. And this isn't necessarily just a Hebrew thing or a Torah thing. This is a God thing, in my opinion. This is how Yah does it. It's kind of like when you're, whether it's somebody you're training at work or it's a little one in your household, you have to repeat over and over and over. And how you phrase things and the language that you use and what is being said over and over again starts to carry weight to the point where you might say the same thing that I would say, but it's not going to ring the bell to my child when you say it as it would when I say it. You see what I'm saying? Right. It has a significant meaning. So you have that language there for many reasons. Okay. So we talked about 70 kind of a little bit, and we talked a little bit about the connecting of Genesis here. Are you ready to move on to verse 8 here?
Let's do it.
Okay. So Exodus 1 verse 8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Okay. We know that this king didn't know Joseph personally because we're talking hundreds of years. Right. No matter where you fall on the fence line of the 480 versus the 200 something to 300 something, there's different views on that, right? All together in between there, no matter what, you're talking hundreds of years. Right. So obviously this verse, a new king over Egypt that didn't know Joseph. Well, yeah, of course he didn't physically know Joseph. So what is actually being emphasized here, Jeff? Are we talking that he's not honoring what Joseph had done for Egypt, they've forgotten?
I kind of think that I'm thinking that here we see a new king, a new pharaoh, maybe even a new line. I think that's what David Roll and them suggests, is a new line that's come in, a different starting of a different dynasty that has no connection. Maybe like the changing of political parties here in the U.S. I know it happens every 4 years, or 8 years. But think of it kind of in those terms. You got a new party taking taken power. And you know what? All those guys that were in favor of the other king, we're not messing with that guy. We don't even know him. And man, whew, what goes on? I mean, think about this. You have someone that is like a national hero, Joseph. He's a national hero for Egypt.
Yeah.
And he was a foreigner. And all of a sudden, we think he's like we know he's the second command of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, after he dies, maybe there's another one or two people that's in place, and then we get to
I'm thinking it was a little bit more than one or two, but
could be.
Yeah. So you got rising up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, and what I really wanted to emphasize there is this is not about a physical knowing. We know that, right? There's no way he would have known. This guy would have had to been, like some kind of mythical character that lives hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right.
Because in this time period, we don't see that in scripture anymore. I mean, we see living in a little bit past 100, but not hundreds.
Right.
Let alone reigning for hundreds. Right. But this is a not honoring of what Joseph had done. This is not honoring the Israelites and their position. This is no longer seeing them. And like you said, I mean, Egypt wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for Joseph.
Right.
When you look back at the 7 years, the 7 bad years that they had prepared for because of Joseph, that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Right.
Okay.
And then you get into this whole political arena where it talks about they're looking at the children of Israel. They're growing more and mightier than we. I mean, that's what it says. Look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. They are outpopulating Egypt, the native-born Egyptians. And now it's just like anything else. It's political. It's like, wow, we can't have these guys take over our country. And so that's the mindset behind the political nature of the time. And, it goes in and talks about let's they're going to, if it happens a war, they'll join our enemies.
Right.
Wow. They'll throw us out of the land.
This is a people who are amassing and are of foreign descent.
Yep.
Right. And as you said, it says more and mightier. Right. And it said, look at the fear here speaking. Let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, that they join our enemies. So they're not necessarily worried about the Israelites on their own. Right. Rising up and taking over, but rather becoming that backup, that support for an enemy military, and thus tipping the scales in the favor of the enemy and overthrowing Egypt. Therefore, they set over taskmasters to afflict them with burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Right. So there comes one of those verses that becomes a real bit of a stronghold. In a way, right? For certain viewpoints on timing, they see that word Pithom and Ramses, and there's all kinds of arguments about whether that Ramses is that even actually a reference to Ramses, and even if it was, which I don't believe it is at all, it would have to be the second Ramses, not the first. The more you dig into things to make things fit, to try to force that into place, that you would have to see that. But the view I hold, and I think, Jeff, you and I, we both agreed on this, right? We said that we believe this was an addition afterwards. So this is more about a geographical marking rather than a timing marking.
Yeah, so I think it's a clarification to the reader.
Yeah.
Because
it's like if I wrote a book and then Jeff were to come along 50 years later and say, well, the town that he referenced isn't even in existence anymore. It's now called this.
Yeah.
And adding that.
We have things like that in our culture today in the United States. We'll have a town that's named something back in the early 1800s, and all of a sudden when they go to file a patent for or file the paperwork to get their post office, there's another Liberty City or whatever. Okay, well, let's change it to Red Rock or whatever. So they have to make changes if they see stuff. Exact same thing going on here. It was something that was renamed. Of ours didn't exist anymore because they had changed the name and built this over. And this was actually quite common for pharaohs and different leaders to rename things after themselves. We see that a lot. We see that not only in Egyptian history, we see that all the way through. What did Alexander the Great? What did he named? Yeah. How many Alexandrias did we have? Right? Constantinople's. How many do we have of those? Right? So there's a lot of. This is not like a new thing. This isn't a big shocker, But again, I think this was just something that was renamed to give the reader in the Tanakh an understanding of where this city was, or these cities were.
And here's the issue. If one is to assume that this verse here shows that it's during the time of the second Ramses, because you can't really argue the first,
Right.
Then you have the issue of, what is it, Genesis 47 that mentions the city as well, which would have been before the time of the first. Yeah. So if you're looking at it as a definite timing clue, I would suggest that there is issues with that. Okay, moving forward.
Yep.
So the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, right?
So I just want to say, a lot of people try to think that, oh, they were in slavery for 400 years. I don't think so. I mean, there's arguments for maybe 280, 250, all the way down to 100. They were only in slavery for 130 something years. So different arguments for that. But I know some people see some of the scripture in Genesis and they're, they have to be in slavery for 400 years. Not just says they have to be in Israel or Egypt for 400 years. So.
Right. And you've got all kinds of arguments too on that slavery, right? Because, you look at how Egyptians treated their slaves and things like that. And you've got some of the skeptical, more the atheist leaning scholars who will simply say, well, the slaves had it actually pretty good. They were doing the building and they point to building capital buildings and things like this and like your pyramids and stuff, which the Israelites were not a part of building the pyramids, despite whatever cartoon or movie you've watched. I hate to break it to you, the Israelites did not build the pyramids, especially not in this time period, if they had anything to do with it at all, which I don't believe they did.
Right.
But they point to the slaves who worked on capital buildings and things like this, government buildings, and it says, well, they worked hard, but they were paid well and they were provided for. So they try to argue, well, the Israelites didn't even really have it that bad. That's why they wanted to go back, this, that, and the other. But when you really start to getting to the nitty gritty and you start looking at the parts that the Israelites were actually shown to have built, to compare that to how the treatment of others who built the other buildings, it is not a fair connection or assumption. Okay, so as to say, for those arguments, there's some things that are being assumed and dismissed that I think are not wise to ignore and dismiss. Okay, so it says they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field, all their service wherein they made them serve with rigor. Mortar and brick. Where do we see that phrase, Jeff? You know what I'm talking about?
Babylon.
Yeah, there's only one, and it seems to me that this is, again, another callback. Okay, I'm not saying that this is just poetic language, as some might state. I'm not stating that this is poetic. Yeah. A lot of people try to pick apart Exodus to where everything's poetic, to you start out with a couple small details and before you know it, they didn't even cross the sea.
Right.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things that are going on in between of all the severity of different inputs. And I'm not trying to say I'm not calling names or saying there's ignorance or I'm right and you're wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying we're here to present what we see, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to present what we see.
Yep.
And it's for the listener to pray on it, study it for themselves and see where they land. I have no problem with looking at the other sides. I like to listen to them and hear them out.
Sure.
But this language here.
Think about this, Ian. If we weren't open, the first moment we were watching Patterns of Evidence, we would have shut it off. Oh, this guy doesn't agree with the mainstream. Throw him out, right? So be open, guys, and be open to listening to other viewpoints. Again, this is tying it back to Genesis, to Babel. These are tying all kinds of little symbolisms here. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say Babylon was the center point of the world during that time. Now we have a shift going to the world symbology to Egypt. So before we see, and again, first law of reference, will take precedent. So anytime we see something with Babel or Babylon being referenced, we understand that's talking in Scripture about the world. Here we see a shift and tying that in a secondary nature to Egypt, and the same thing can be said about Egypt. When you talk about Egypt, you're talking about the world as a whole. Do we want to get in? No, I was going to get into the to the ruling principalities and powers that were maybe shifted around and things like this after Babel. We know that Yah allowed 70 Elohim entities, not Yah, but Elohim entities, to set up shop and rule different nations, and even allowed them to worship them. Interesting things. And here we go. We were discussing everything with related around Babylon. Now we've shifted focus. Now we're into Egypt, and the entities that we see down here. Man, wow, all kinds of stuff. I know we'll get more into that when we get into the plagues, but this is a real deal. These guys have lines kind of drawn in the sand. No pun intended, but lines drawn in the sand, and the way they're worshipped, the things that are going on, are in direct contrast to Yah. And here we go. God's people, just like Abraham called Abram out of Babylon, right? Called him out of Ur. We're going to see God call his people again out of the world. So again, so many parallels that we see here, and they have a choice to make. Are they going to stay worshiping these pagan gods, or are they going to be true Hebrews? Come on, Hebrew means to cross over, get out of town, right? Are they going to cross over? Any reference of crossing over with the Exodus, right? So, we see all these tie-ins together. Man, I just love it. There's so much here. I want to be quiet. We have 3 chapters to go. I want to be quiet.
Yeah, we do. But that number 70, I would argue, is also a nod back to the Tower of Babel for anybody who studies that out. There's going to be some in the chat right now who know what I'm talking about. There's others that won't. If that's not something you've studied out, it might not be time for that. But there is the understanding, that belief of either 70 or 72 separating from the tower, and then you get your strongholds. And when you really get deep into the study, you start looking at the boundaries not only on earth but in the heavens above. And you have the 70 to 72 depending on which line you fit on that. I do believe the pyramids were more than likely built before the flood. I've seen a lot of evidence on that. I'm just going off with something that was asked in the chat. I don't know about the specific video you're referencing, but I do know that was often the conclusion I came to. But yeah, when you have this brick and mortar mentioned here, I could be wrong, but from what I remember, the only other time we see that in scripture reference is to Babel. Right. So we've got, like you talked about, you've got Babylon, and you've got the Egypt, and you've got multiple scriptures come out of Babylon, come out of Egypt, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not just referring to just those countries, but the world, like you're talking about. You have a smaller analogy picture of what is representing the matrix, really. But not only do we have that, but we also have the understanding of, especially for that time period, we're trying to put ourselves in the mindset of then, right? As well as looking at it for how it applies to us for now, as well as the future. And looking at it back then, we're getting the language of, this is the scene of chaos, right? I think Heiser was the one that was talking about this, somehow, how at that time of Tower of Babylon, that was the scene of chaos. That was the chaotic central, right? This would be the scene, the center of chaos at that time. So that poetic language that is not just poetic, in my opinion, I believe this is literal as well. And I don't know if we'll get into that tonight, but there is
just one more quick thing on the bricks and mortar. Bricks and mortar, those are stones made by man. That is man setting up their kingdom on earth, where the unhewn stones are from Yah, and that's him setting up his kingdom on earth. So just you're making references to altars. There's going to be some people in the chat that are going to catch them. The rest have no idea what you're talking about. The unhewn stone and how that reference is not touching any. You can even compare that to the Nazarites and all kinds of things like that too, if you really want to. But anyhow, okay, so you get that brick and mortar, right? And there is archaeological evidence of this as well. I remember the first time I came across this. Patterns of evidence goes across it as well, but the first time I came across this was Why I Believe by Kennedy. He wrote a book called Why I Believe, right? And in there, he was talking about how up until, what was it, like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, something like that, the average scholar was arguing that the Bible is not historical, right? As they're always arguing, saying that the word Hittite, that there was no tribe of Hittite, that there was never a Hittite. And then in that time period, I think it was around the 70s, they came across proof showing the Hittite, right? And there was a connection there to the brick and mortar built with and without straw in a certain portion of Egypt, and how you can see that there was, the straw lessened over time. And this was, there's a lot of cool stuff there for anybody who wants to look into it. We might touch on that a little bit more depth in the next video
around. We'll see as we try to get into a little bit more of the details of things tonight. We're going to try to get into the heart of the matter more and the introduction to Exodus, right? Should we move forward? Are you ready for this?
Man, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay, so the king of
I
Egypt.
feel like we're just flying through, guys, but
yeah.
there's so much here. And again, we are trying to take our time. We are trying to hit some really high points. Again, we're preparing you guys for Pesach, for Passover. We're trying to get you in the mindset of what's going on in the past, what's leading up to this, and why are these things important. Again, I think when Moshe is writing this stuff down for Exodus, he is making so many parallels back to Genesis and back to what Yah, when he was being dictated by Yah what to write for Bereshit, for Genesis, and then as he's going through the Exodus, he's living this, guys. This is stuff that he knows about. I mean, he is writing all this because this is actual history for him. What we're just starting to get into in verse 15. I guess we can start there.
Okay, so the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives. Real quick, do you think those midwives were actual Hebrew, or do you think that they were the midwives for the Hebrews?
Wow. I've never considered that. I've always assumed that they were the Hebrew midwives.
Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out at you just to see what your view was on that, because I know that there's some differing views on that. I believe they are Hebrew as well, but you've got the orders from the Egyptian king and the pharaoh, things like that, and there's some that speculate that they were actually.
I see what you're talking about, yeah.
Right. Okay. So the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah and the name of the other was Puah, and he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew woman and you see them upon the stools, right, depending on what version you have, they have different words for stool there. If it be a son, then you shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. All right.
Do you know what Shafar and Puah mean?
I don't. Go for it, Jeff.
So I'm always big on that kind of stuff. So they mean respectively beauty and splendor. So amen.
Beauty and splendor.
Are the two. Oh, look at there, hey. Amen. So we have beauty and splendor being the two the name of one of these the name of both of the midwives dealing with Moshe's birth. So wow.
And you want to talk about inner and spiritual beauty and splendor. These are individuals, and you and I like to talk about this a lot, about how the names are fitting. And we see that in scripture, and it's not even just a scripture thing. We see that outside of scripture as well. If you start asking people what their names are and you look at their family names and things like that, often you can see God's little thumbprint on that person, showing, what their purpose is and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, but I got to pause here. Do you remember, Jeff, when I told you that I had something that was new for me for tonight's video?
Yes.
This is the verse, okay?
This verse.
This is the verse. So going through it the past few days, mostly this past week, but mainly the past couple of days, especially when we decided last minute to do this introductory video and then give me like anxiety about not having as much time to prepare.
About a day, right?
Yeah. Well, I counted out after I looked at the sections and said, oh my goodness, we have 7 videos, but 6 days to do it. How are we going to do this? And I was praying out and felt like we were supposed to do it tonight. And I was like, I have no notice. We're going to be going off the cuff. A lot of these other videos are going to probably have a lot more.
Guys, ready to go.
Yeah. I wore 2 just for you, Jeff.
Oh, there you go, brother. Amen.
Okay, so going through it, I saw that whole, when you do the office of midwife to the Hebrew woman, you see them upon the stools. If it be a son, then you shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, you shall live. And I've thought about this before, but I didn't get too much into it until the past couple of days. I'm sitting there going, okay, look at the verses that follow, okay? The midwives feared God, right? And this is a good fear, and did not as the king of Egypt, which also kind of points to them more than likely being Hebrew, that they feared Yah, and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men, children alive, right? And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing and have saved the men, children alive? And the midwives said to the Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women. They're not the same. They're lively and are delivered ere the midwives come into them. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. Okay, hold on a minute. So you mean to tell me that all they had to do was simply say, hey, we get there to do the prenup checkup thing, and they just popped out? And the Pharaoh's like, okay, yeah, never mind then. I mean, so when you first look at that, my first thoughts were, okay, maybe he was that fear again of the Israelites rising up if you just start slaughtering them after they're, once they're born, right? But here's the thing, Jeff. Okay, all they did was say, they pop them, and there's no discussion of like, well, why didn't you kill him after? Okay. Have you looked at that word for stools there? Depending on what version you've got, some of them have different words.
Nope.
Okay. So I had half of this in my head already, but I didn't know about the other half that I'm going to bring up until I was watching Heiser's stuff that I was telling you about for the past couple days. Okay. So when you look at that word stools there, okay, it's a potter's wheel. And they say, oh, it's also could be a midwife stool. Okay, look, a potter's wheel. They're not bearing children on potter's wheel, but that word there, that stool, that potter's wheel, is the same word, Jeff, used in Jeremiah, talking about the potter and the potter's wheel.
Interesting.
Okay, so Heiser does a lot better job explaining this than I'm about to right now, right? But there was this understanding that at that time period, the Egyptians had their deities, and one of which that was meant to create the child in the womb, right? And would choose gender and things of this nature as the child is coming out onto the. So it was called the potter's wheel because you're still forming until they pop out. Once they're out, they've already. Okay, so there's this understanding then. So if we look at this, if that is indeed not just a theory, but what's actually being communicated here when he says when you see them on the stools, because they weren't. These Hebrew women weren't sitting on stools, okay? Right? And you say, okay, well, the midwives are sitting on the stools. Okay, but again, then why wouldn't you just slaughter the child after it's out? There's this understanding that he wanted them to abort the fetus within the womb. And Egyptians are great at record keeping, right?
Right.
And they show, we've seen, they had the proof of being able to tell the gender before the child comes out of the womb.
Yep.
They were also able to do abortion within the womb. This is not, for anybody who thinks this is something that's new for the past, couple hundred years or whatever. It's not. This dates back thousands.
Right.
So it seems. So what my point is it seems to me that what they're suggesting here is that he was wanting them to kill the child if it's a male in the womb. Therefore, it could look like a miscarriage. Right. But once the child's already born, now you're possibly upsetting the deity. It's already past the potter's wheel.
Interesting. No, I had not heard that before. That's very interesting. Okay.
I thought that was a fun little tidbit. And like I said, that's my new piece for me for tonight's video. I have nothing else. You can take the rest of the show, Jeff. I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. So we have Yah deals well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. It came to pass because the midwives feared Yah that he made them houses. Right? They got cities and things like that. I don't know if you've seen this, but they have a poster where they have the two women with the head covering scarf. They're midwives, and it's got the verse all the way around it. Have you seen that?
No.
My wife and I had we had a midwife in a different state. We'll just say that where midwives have to hide in basements and are not allowed to say what they do and things legally.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a very interesting time. And this particular midwife was not a believer, but she had that poster on her wall. And I nudged my wife and said, take a picture of that. That's so cool. It's got an Exodus verse there talking about, because the midwives feared God, they built houses. And I just found that very interesting. Okay. So it says, Pharaoh changed all his people, saying, every son that is born shall you cast in the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. Kind of reminds me of other communistic countries that are not so distant in the past.
Right. Well, I mean, it's and we see also parallels to Herod. Killing the male children. And guys, listen, this is some serious stuff. So there's so many parallels between Yeshua and Moshe. This is one of them, guys. The birth of Moshe and the birth of Yeshua both were marked with massive killing of male children.
Yeah.
And how interesting is this? This ends up being one of the judgments that comes back to Egypt. What you sowed, listen, guys, do not be mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, whatsoever a nation soweth, that shall it also reap. So there, some people say, well, I don't know how to pray for the nation. Ask God for forgiveness, because we're killing babies every day. We're doing all these massive atrocities every day. And here we see there's a judgment that's coming because of this. Same judgment, a similar judgment happened to Israel after the destruction of the temple. They got that. Listen, they were destroyed as a nation for a little bit. There was a remnant that was always around, but they got kind of the same judgment, if you will, if you think of so many parallels.
Yeah, they were after the male child, and it was the firstborn son.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, Jeff. Too, you want to compare to Herod, which is a good connection there.
Yeah.
The infanticide, right? The genocide of infants of a specific
Infanticide,
gender.
infanticide.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah. And in 2018, I went to Take on the World, right?
Right.
And I went into a see if I can remember her name. Was it Judy Wood? I can't remember. Somebody else might be able to remember. There was a woman there who was very well knowledged, and she was giving her presentations on some of the words that we can't use tonight, right? And this was in 2018,
Right.
Okay? And she was going over SIDS and SUIDS, okay? And she was talking about how a lot of the statistics of, the SUIDS has gone down. It hadn't actually gone down. It had risen up, but they had given it a new moniker. They had given it a new nomenclature, right? It's no longer SIDS. So you have the percentage of that. Now it's SUIDS. And now all of a sudden, since we gave it a new name and we've made a new file and we're putting only new ones in there, the numbers are lower, right? Because you're not combining the two. And for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about with the nomenclatures there, SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome. And then SUIDS, as if it's anything different, sudden unexplained infant death syndrome. So there's literally no difference. Now, so she's showing the statistics on that and how the other one was lower only because they weren't combining, and she proves the documentation with that. Again, 2018. And as she's going over this, she starts comparing it to records of timing based on when these infants were dying, and it was matching so much so that the correlation and causation there very well could be strongly connected, and you'd kind of have to have a bias to not see as a connection. And she was showing the difference between male and female, Jeff, and it seemed to be strongly geared towards the males. And as I'm listening to this presentation in 2018, right, and keep in mind at this time my wife is pregnant with my son.
Oh wow.
So I'm watching this presentation, and I got to a certain point as she's discussing this, and I started feeling and hearing in the spirit, just as in Exodus, just as in the time of Herod, the enemy again is desiring to wipe out the Hebrew male baby boys. And this is the method that they're doing by the serpent tongue through a form of pharmakia, right?
Wow.
And when I heard that and felt it in the spirit, I got disgusted. I thought I was going to either black out or vomit or something. I had to leave the room.
Wow.
I was angry and disgusted and overwhelmed. But I'm glad you brought up that connection because, as you said, this is not just something in the past. And when you're looking at these end times, whether or not you believe that we are in those times, if you do, all the more reason to think that there would be yet again a heavy pattern there to line up with those first two. Yeah,
it's good.
All right, are you ready to move on to chapter 2, or do you have anything else to say on chapter 1 for the moment?
Let's see. I'm thinking.
We're under 1 hour for the first chapter, Jeff. We're doing good.
We're smoking through this, man. We're rolling through.
I've been kind of forcefully rushing it, haven't I?
Oh yeah, no, we're good. Yeah, just real quick. I had a thought just based off of what we were just talking about. It is such a trick of the enemy to come in and just change the name of something, just to throw things off. We started finding out high fructose corn syrup is bad for you, so they changed the name of it. Right? It's still there, but they changed the name, so it's okay to have now. Just all kinds of. I can think of bunches of different things, but I'm just thinking what a simple trick of the enemy to just tweak it a little bit. Oh, that's fine. Just carry on. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm ready. Let's start off with the birth of Moshe here. Here we go, chapter 2.
Yeah. Okay. There went a man of the house of Levites. We're being shown lineage here, another Hebrew thing, but there's reasons for that as well, right? You're the Levites, right? And took to a wife a daughter of Levi, kept it within the same tribe. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. Okay. So we know that he was hid for 3 months, right? So
it says goodly child in your translation there. Beautiful child. It literally means beautiful. So we see some comparisons here from Moshe to Noah as well. So when Noah was born, we see some nomenclatures like this as well. We see, some people believe that Noah was maybe even glowing a little bit. And so this beauty is talking about something that's radiating. So we may see some evidences there as well. Again, so just some similarities we see going into this.
Okay.
I'm trying to go fast, brother. I'm not trying.
Yeah. Was that a nod to the Enoch?
Absolutely.
Was that what you're nodding to? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so she hit him for 3 months, right? So we got that number 3, which we're going to see all throughout, right?
Right.
But we're also showing a time period here. She was able to hide him for 3 months, which is, for anybody who's actually had a baby, imagine trying to hide your infant up to 3 months, and for somebody who doesn't have a baby, or maybe it's been some time, you can say, well, they sleep most of the time. Man, when a child wails, though, when a baby wails, right? There's,
It carries.
And as a mother, that she was at all times on the ready to do whatever she could do to quiet. And how many sleepless nights, Jeff, do parents have trying to get their baby to calm down?
Yeah.
So you see again the divine thumbprint here, Jeff, because I've had nights, Jeff, where I had the vacuum cleaner running and I'm like trying to hold the baby and do the rocking and all this other stuff. And we're talking hours, and that can't be happening here. Otherwise, unless you've got your neighbors making noise to drown it out, whatever was going on, Yah's hand is definitely on the situation here, as we know from the story.
Yeah.
So it says when she could no longer hide him, right? 3 months was the point. She took for him an ark of bulrushes, daubed it with slime and pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river brink. Okay, you and I both have some things I think to say about this verse here. But here's the first thing I want to mention, Jeff.
Yeah.
And there might be some people who don't like that I say this, but that's okay. That's okay. We're bringing to the table what we see and what we have to bring to the table. It's up to you and your prayers and your studies to chew meat and spit out whatever you think is bones. Yeah. What was the edict? What was the command of Pharaoh, Jeff?
Throw him in the river.
Throw him in the river.
Yep.
Put him in the river.
That's right.
What does Moshe's mom do?
After 3 months, she throws him in the river.
She puts him in the river, right?
Puts him in the river.
And obviously, it's not as haphazardly. It's not so that the child dies. It's not according to all the statutes and ordinances of this specific command of the Pharaoh, right? But I'm pointing this up because I see a lot of post times where they say, Moses' mom went against the commandment of the authorities, and to a degree she did.
She held it off for a while. She held it off for 3 months.
But I would say she found a loophole, Jeff.
She did.
If they were to catch her doing it, would she not have been able to say, you said to put my child in the river? I put my child in the river.
Yeah.
And of course you'd be pleading and tugging on heartstrings there saying, you expect me just to throw my child to drown. Like, I'm still doing as you told me to do. I couldn't just kill my child.
Yeah.
But the command was put your child in the river. And she did exactly that. She did exactly that. They didn't say that, we don't see anyways that in the edict that I had subsection A, and we don't mean in a homemade basket with pitch in and out and things like that. We don't see that in subsection A, right?
Well, so I think what you're saying, it goes back to what Yeshua says, that we're supposed to be as a believer. We're supposed to be as wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove. Here's a perfect example of that that Yah gives us. I think this was something that Yah gave her to do. And we see, I think you want to probably get into the actual construction of it, but we see how God actually gave her an idea of how to build this. Again, Isaiah 46:10, man, Yah declares the end from the beginning. Yah is outside of time. He's looking into what's going on. Do you think that, you have a train of thought? Either God said, and blew this ark a certain way to make it go over here, or Yah knew a certain time for her to put it in so that this certain current catches it and takes it right in front of Pharaoh's daughter. I mean, all kinds of things.
I would actually say neither. You want to hear my viewpoint on this?
Yeah, let's hear it. Yeah.
I don't hear this often. Okay, and this has been my view for 9 years now. Okay, she could no longer hit him. She took for him an ark of bulrushes, daubed it with the slime and with pitch, which I'll let you have the floor on how that connects to Noah if you'd like. We've got nods to Genesis and in so many ways already. Right, we've got a nod to the Tower of Babel. We've got a nod to Noah now. You've got nod to Abraham and his promise. There's a lot of tie-ins here, but I don't believe that it's just poetic. I really want to emphasize that. I believe that this is literal, that she really did do this. Okay, and put the child there, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink.
Right.
I'm going to propose. This is how I see it, Jeff. That ark didn't float down any river. That ark didn't float at all in the sense of going down. It stayed put. Okay, river's brink, on the edge, in the flags. You've got the tall grasses, the weeds, and things like that. I believe, whether it was just simply Yah's timing or Yah allowed them to know, I personally believe that they knew when the daughter would go for bathing. They knew when, they knew where, right? This was not that, that it was,
I see what you're talking about.
that it was placed down in a certain way and that the wind and the waves carried it, but rather, because look, Jeff, look at this, right? It says placed in the flags by the river's brink. Okay, so you're not putting it in a position where it's just going to float down nilly-willy. If it's going to move, it would take some time. But the very next verse says, and his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him.
Right.
Okay. They had, as it seems to me, they knew when she was going to come out to bathe. As it seems to me, they knew where her line of vision would be. They placed this,
I see what you're talking.
this arc straight across from where it was. The sister went and stood afar off to be able to view it. It doesn't say she was prepared to run up and down this thing and see what happens. This doesn't look haphazard. This doesn't look blind faith to me, Jeff. This looks like wise planning led by the Father. She was shown how to do it, when to do it, and how to go about it.
I can deal with that.
That's what I'm seeing. Okay, so here's your chance, Jeff, if you'd like to weigh in on about how the pitch within and out and anything else you have.
So guys, listen, if you've ever listened to me, you probably heard me talk about this. Years ago, I was doing a big study on the Noah's Ark and how this was related to us, spirit, soul, and body. There was 3 levels in Noah's Ark. And I'm laying there, this is before the age of computers. I've got a Strong's Concordance out. I've got my, study materials. I think I had my Matthew Henry's Concise Bible Dictionary out. We're studying and looking at this. I'm getting ready for a message. I think I'm about 19 or 20 years old, looking and studying this stuff. And I hear the Father speak to me and say, hey, look up that word pitch. And I started arguing with the Holy Spirit. I'm like, it wasn't an audible voice, but I argue with God for a little bit, and I finally look up this word pitch. I think I already know what it is. It's this black tarry stuff, right? That's what it's a waterproofing thing. But when you actually look up the word pitch in Hebrew, it means to make a ransom for, to make atonement. So here again, same word, same type of thing, same word used as ark, right? We can get into some things with that. But this ark of the covenant, right? This is an ark of the covenant. Noah had an ark of the covenant. Man, we can go so many places. So this was an ark to help establish the covenant going forward, and it carried something, right? And inside and outside of this deal was this black tarry stuff, and it means to make a ransom for, to make atonement. And so we see this making atonement, carrying and saving, providing salvation for Moshe, when if she had just thrown him in the river, he would have drowned, right?
Well, not only that, but you see him as the deliverer and salvation and atonement for all of Israel.
Absolutely. Yeah, he is Messiah, guys. I know some people don't like to say that, but he was Mashiach for Israel during this time frame. And Yah put him there and covered him in a ark. So many things here. But again, that whole idea, we need to understand this just real quick. As we are new creatures in Messiah, and we are that ark we are that ark now carrying around that presence of Yah, right? The scripture talks about us being the temple of Yah, but we're also that same ark. We have the same 3 levels, and inside and outside of us, all the way through, every part of our being is this atonement, this ransom that's been paid for. That is how complete our salvation is. And that's why it talks about we're saved spirit, soul, and body. We don't get our bodies until the very end, but so are you truly saved to the end? Find out, wait and see, guys.
You're gonna take all kinds of trails here, aren't you, Joe?
yeah. I'll just anyway, yeah. So, but yeah,
So foreshadowing of a Messiah, definitely a savior type for the time period. We have the atonement and salvation being referenced there with the pitch. I love how you bring that up. I knew you had mentioned this to me before about how you had a whole thing about pitch and Noah's Ark months before we ever talked about doing an Exodus study. So when I saw that verse, I said, you gotta let Jeff do his spiel here on this verse. Did you have more that you wanted to go into on that, or are you ready to move forward?
That's fine, man. That's fine.
Okay, so the sister stood afar off to wit what would be done. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. Her maidens walked along by the river's side, Jeff. Okay. And when she saw the ark among the flags, Jeff, she saw the ark among the flags. It looks like it didn't move. That's what I'm saying. She sent her maid to fetch it. I'm telling you, Jeff. But this is the image that I saw when I first read it. And so, like, when I kept reading it over and over and seeing all these little different things that confirm it.
Just for the listener, just for clarification, just for the listener, in case they're not getting it, you're saying that when she went and put the ark, she put it in a place that there wasn't necessarily a current going.
I'm saying that they knew that it would be secure.
In amongst the reeds where it's not moving.
This isn't a secure position. It said river's brink, Jeff. So this would be probably one of the most shallow spots of the river as well.
Yep.
You know, I believe they had an idea of when and what day. This wasn't just a random day or random time. They knew when the princess or the daughter of the Pharaoh, whatever you want to call her, would come out. I believe they knew that, and they were trying to get there ahead of time. The daughter's going to stand afar off to make sure that the girl doesn't come to bathe so many hours past that they need to grab him out again so he doesn't get sick. That's what I believe is going on here. She's here to observe and see and make sure. After so many hours, bring him back. We'll try again next Tuesday when she comes back out again, whatever the deal is.
Yeah, and they also had to time it with the flooding season. Maybe that's why we had 3 years, because gosh, you know, the Nile would flood and it would flood everywhere. They didn't have we can get into all that, but yeah, man, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So it said that she was laid in the flags by the river's brink. The maidens walked by the river's side. She saw the ark among the flags. I'm just going to leave it at that. I think I've emphasized my view on that well enough.
Nice.
I just don't see it ever talked about. So I think it's worth stating.
So
she sent her maids to fetch it. She saw it, not her maids, which is why I believe it was a cross. Okay. Her maids are on her side walking the edge. They put it in, like I said, they knew her vision, her line of vision there. Okay. So when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. Okay. So, you know, when you watch Prince of Egypt and all these other ones, and they have the baby crying, and that's what catches her attention. Again, it's this mindset of this basket is just floating down the river. They never show the tar or slime or pitch or anything like that, do they, Jeff? So you've got this basket that could easily just drown, right? It would just sink right away. It's floating down this thing. Sometimes they do this, alligators and crocodiles and all kinds of crazy things that are trying to chomp at it and stuff like that. And it just so happens to come along at the right time. And what I see is none of that. But she saw the basket, or the ark rather, but she didn't know what was in it, is what I believe. It says the babe, and then the babe wept. Okay, so these are things to consider.
Yep.
She opens it, she saw the child, and beheld the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, right? You know, if the baby's crying ahead of time, maybe it would have already turned into annoyance.
Right.
You know, there's some things to think about here. This is one of the Hebrews' children. She recognized right away, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, is that a circumcision reference?
Right.
I mean, there's multiple views here. Yeah, there's multiple views. I mean, you could talk about skin tone and the different beliefs on that and things like that. But you know, Hebrews' children. This is not just foreigner. It specifically says Hebrew. So I think there's some things being indicated there as well.
Yep.
I mean, it's just speculation, but that's what I see. So then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter. So now the sister comes up, and she's helpful out of nowhere.
Hey!
Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew woman, that she may nurse the child for thee? It just so happens, I know somebody who could be a wet nurse. I know somebody who would be able to nurse this child until they are weaned, right? And then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go, and the maid went and called the child's mother. Okay, before we go into this more, I was going over this with my wife today, right?
Yeah.
And she says to me, she goes, well, at the very least, we know that Moshe would have been nursing clean, kosher breast milk.
Absolutely.
That he would have. We don't know about what he would have been fed in the palace and what he would or would not have eaten as he was raised in the palace. But at this point, we do see. I just thought that was an interesting thing because I hadn't thought of that. But my wife, being my wife, you know, thinks of that right away. Like, oh well, you know. So Pharaoh's daughter says to her, "Take this child away." Right. That should be underlined there. I think a lot of people don't see that. Take this child away and nurse it for me. Right. She's talking to the sister, but it's not the sister that's nursing. She's talking about the mom here.
Right.
And I will give thee, because that's not always understood either. And I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Okay.
How cool is that? Hold
on. One more verse and we'll get into it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto the Pharaoh's daughter. The child grew, and she brought him unto the Pharaoh's daughter. There's often that understanding of going back and forth, going to fetch him every day, things like that. The Hebrew woman coming in and being a maiden there, and then you've got the issues of all kinds of things. Brought the child to her. Take this child away. she brought him to the Pharaoh's daughter as the child grew, right? So as it seems to me, what happened was out of faith and through prayer and hope based on faith, Moses' mother places the child in a well-built ark that would not sink, in a well-placed positioning so that it would be seen right away. The child won't get sick and won't be in danger and won't float away.
That's cool.
The daughter of the Pharaoh sees it, opens it, says, the sister comes up and she says, I can take it to a wet nurse. She said, take the child, bring it back to me when he is weaned, right? And then there would be speculation on how long that would be. I mean, because different people wean their child at different times, and it's based on things like this. And my wife was speculating that, that the woman would have been in a hurry, but there's also that understanding that maybe she would want to make sure the child is healthy, and there's even the speculation that this daughter would have been with a homosexual and therefore would not be able to have a child of her own and would be more apt to adopt based on certain timeline beliefs that there was an individual. And again, we're not going to get too much into the timeline stuff, but I thought I'd throw that in there while I remember to do that.
Okay.
So the mother gets her child back and is paid.
I love it.
To nurse her child.
I love that. I mean, how poetic is that for Yah to reward this mother? It makes you wonder, did she know everything that was going to go on with Moshe? Did Yah give her some extra knowledge or anything like that we're just not aware of? But here we go. By faith, she puts him. Well, it's not only her faith; it's the husband's faith too. I think that they both played a part in this. I think we read in Hebrews where it talks about the parents. It's not just the mother, but the parents. And so here we go. By faith, they put their baby out in the water, and with this whole thing going on, and then turns around and bam, you're getting paid to raise your own child. I would even argue that she probably kept, probably tried to nurse him till he was, maybe 3 or 4, just so she could stay with him for an extra longer time, right? Because she knows once she gives him up, he's gone.
Yeah. Right.
So gosh, but how cool is that? You think about this again. I always try to put myself in that mindset of what's going on. How many women lost their children?
Yeah. During
this time? How many women are going through massive amounts of depression? The men too. Everybody. This is hurting time right here, and Yah blesses this one woman. She's already had a couple children already. We know she already had Aharon. She had Miriam, and then here comes this other child. She's pregnant. Everything's great, man. This is a great time. Even though we're in bondage, we're doing this, but I'm about to have another baby. Yah is blessing me with another baby. This edict comes out by the Pharaoh. Fear sets in. I mean, try to tie this in like you're sitting at home watching the news, and I don't know, ENN comes on, right? Egyptian News Network, I don't know, comes on, and then they're like, by order of the Pharaoh, we're going to be wiping out all the Hebrew children here, the male children, and guys, listen, do your part. It's a part of national pride, guys.
Get the thing.
Do your part. Comply.
Get the thing, do the thing, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Jeff. The interesting thing is the first line of defense was the midwives. The Pharaoh didn't tell the parents, throw your children into the river. The first command was to those who were to be aiding, those outside the house, right? You were thinking logically that an outsider of the house would be easier to use to utilize, right? And they stood their ground. Yeah. They stood their ground. They drew a line, and we see Yah blessing them.
So we see a tie-in with the Hebrew midwives with the Canadian truck drivers. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, well, you have a first line of defense. And when the first line of defense stands ground, then it becomes the next line, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And we could speculate, and we're not going to, but we could speculate all night on how this story might have differed had there been those who hadn't bowed the knee at the golden statue when told to toss their children into the river.
Here's the deal. I'll just throw this out there. We know that others were doing this because we have historic records showing a ton of male children that had died during that time. Lots of graves, lots of graves. So we do know that some of the Hebrews midwives did do this, just like we see in Maccabees. It wasn't all the Hebrews that rose up. It was just a small remnant that rose up. There was a large part that went that said, "Hey, yeah, we want to be Hellenized. We want to do this. I want to try me a ham sandwich and all this kind of stuff." Yeah, that was the easy way out. And again, it ties in. Broad is the path that leads to destruction. Narrow is the way.
It's not necessarily an easy path, but it becomes an argument of much like the mark, right?
Yeah.
You have the option of, okay, I don't want to throw my child in the river, but it's either the child or possibly the whole household.
Right.
And so that mindset comes of that compromise, right?
Yeah.
And again, we're talking difference of love and faith and hope versus fear and doubt.
Yeah.
Right. We see fear and doubt in the Pharaoh. We see fear and doubt in the Egyptians. Right. And look at the fear that the midwives have that aren't aborting children. It's a different type of fear. Right. And they get blessed for it. But you see that some of the Hebrews were throwing their children into the rivers. And I think patterns of evidence actually goes into the archaeological proof of the mass graves of the babies and stuff like that. I think they do have the documentation that they mentioned on that as well. But, I mean, I don't know. It's something we need to think about when moving into these end times here, is that when we get to those points of like receive the mark or you can't buy, sell, or trade, and it's a check of faith. It's a check of the foundation of the house that you've been building, your faith, your walk. Do you trust that Yah will provide? Is it one of those, maybe Yah won't provide, but I'll go into the fiery furnace anyhow? Amen. Maybe he won't save me, but I'm still not going to disobey because I believe and trust in that which comes after. I believe that Yah is who he says he is, that he is truly loved, that he knows what's best and furthermore wants what's best. He's got these promises for me. I hold on to those because I know him. And that's really what it comes down to is a relationship. And if you don't have that relationship, you're throwing your children in the river to try to save your own household.
What good is that doing? Just think about it like with the Maccabees. You had some people that didn't bow the knee. They didn't do it. And what happened? They died. They died horrible, horrible deaths. Can we just say it like that? Yeah. I mean, we read those accounts in Maccabees. We can read accounts all the way through history where people that, they stood up for faith and they still died. William Tyndale, come on, right? He's translating the Bible into English and he's burned at the stake for that. So where are we at with our walk? Are we willing to lay down our lives?
Well, go ahead. Here's the thing, Jeff. If you're trying to avoid, things that we all don't want to go through.
Yeah.
What makes you think that you're even promised that avoidance will come through?
Absolutely.
Look at what Revelation talks about: people seeking death and not even finding it, Jeff.
Boom.
You see what I'm saying? And I always see the poetic justice there in the scriptures. You see it that they did this so that they wouldn't have to deal with it. And then guess what? They still end up having to deal with it. And then you see that anger and hatred. And we see that right now in the past 2 years on some of the things. Certain people will follow certain rules and the rest of us don't. And then they get upset that they're dealing with consequences that they were trying to avoid by doing those things.
Absolutely.
So, at the end of the day, is it even worth it if you're trying to avoid something that you might end up going through it anyways? I mean, obviously it's not worth it if it has anything to do with eternal hope and salvation and you're going against Yah's word in general. But I'm just saying these are things we need to think about here. When we're looking at Exodus, it is very hard for me not to compare Exodus line by line for Revelation because there is so much. And we'll get into that more, especially in the videos like 3 and 4 of this series. We're going to be talking about some things that you just can't not. There's the double negative of the night, Jeff. You can't not compare the two. Can't not do it. Okay, so it was the daughter of Pharaoh who called the name Moshe, which wouldn't have been Moshe. Moshe is Hebrew. It would have been something like Masha or something like that, which then gets translated into Moshe, which means because I drew him out of the water. Do you have anything you want to mention on that, on the drawing out of the water, the significance there, the representation, symbolization, things of that nature?
No, I'm good. I don't have a whole lot on that.
Okay, I've got some things. I don't want to go too much into it. We're already 20 minutes in, but I'll say this, okay? Yeah. When you look at Joseph and you look at the dream interpretations, you have the 7 cattle. The KJV says kine. Other versions use different words, right? They came up out of the river, Jeff. And there is some references there. This is a nod to patterns of evidence. David Rowe mentions this, and I love how he talks about this. They didn't touch on it much, but they did it enough to make the gears move. If you haven't heard it before,
Yeah.
The river is equated to the wealth and the sustainability of the economy. There's so much connection to the river and the wellness of the state of Egypt. So as to say, when it dries up, when rivers dry up, hence why we see in eschatological verses talking about the rivers of Euphrates and things of this nature, that, you know, when we start looking at them, you know, there's a few rivers that we look at, and as we start to see them dry up, Euphrates, Tigris, and Jordan and stuff like that, they represent things. And it is, again, physical, representing, mirroring, and representing the spiritual, right? This life-moving, flowing. How oftentimes do we see not just the masses of the people in a negative way, but also spiritual in a good way, in terms of being equated to and used as an analogy of movement of water. There's that flowingness, right? And so you've got both the positive and negative that you can use in those connections there. Well, when you see Moshe coming up out of the water, look at this. I think, my personal opinion, is succinctly stating, even though I'm not being that succinct right now, am I? Is that the Pharaoh's daughter felt that she was extremely blessed. And she sees how fitting to her that it is coming up out of the water. So she is representing that this is up out of the water. You have some reference to deities there as well, and blessings and being provided for out through the abundance of the waters. And you can connect that as well as to the abyss and Abdul and things like that. But basically stating, I believe she's seeing this as up out of the water, wealth, prosperity, blessing. Interesting.
Yeah, the only thing that I kind of get out of it is with water baptism, mikvah immersion, Yeshua talking about you're being you need to be born of water, right? Also being born of water. So that those kind of connotations, that's what I see. New life. You know, he's coming up. You know, he should have been dead. Right. He should have been dead when he hit the water, and when he's being brought up out of the water. That's the only kind of stuff that I saw.
And you've got a little bit of a alliteration. You've got a little bit of a literal, or not literal, a literature reference here, alliteration to Noah again, the starting anew, right? When he comes up out of the ark onto dry land. What do we see going on here with Moshe, right? He's on an ark. He's brought onto dry land, and it's a turning point. A climactic turning point, because this is, like you said, during the death of his peers, you know, and he's again being set apart. We're seeing that as well, just like with Yeshua. And Yeshua, during that genocide, fled to where, Jeff?
He fled to Egypt. Right.
Where he was able to hide for a time until those who wanted him dead were no longer living. But we'll get there, Jeff. We'll get there. I'm making a hint and a nod to next video, because I think that's chapter 4 where we're going to be getting to that in Exodus. Okay, so if you're ready to move forward, we'll move forward.
Let's do it.
Okay, verse 11 here of chapter 2. And it came to pass in those days when Moshe was grown, right, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting in Hebrew one of his brethren. And he looked this way and that way. When he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Okay, we're going to pause right here real quick. So what is it, Acts chapter 7?
7:23.
You had it. See, I had it memorized too, but look at that. That's funny. You had that in your notes, huh? Ready to go.
I did. I'm ready to roll. He was 40 years old when this happened.
Right. And you know, that's often talked about, but unless you show it in the verses, it's kind of like one of those, you know, especially in Exodus. I mean, you and I, we talk about this all the time, right? On how there's differing views on everything. We talk about who was the king during Esther. We talk about all these different time periods and the speculations. Where did Jonah actually flee to? Where is Tarshish? We like to nitpick at those things and point the different views. So, of course, we're going to do that with here. Well, when chronology is such an issue with the book of Exodus, to the point where some people are throwing it in the garbage because of all the questions, or they don't want to pay attention at all, it's good to point out the witness in Scripture. So we see in Acts 7 here, and they're making an account, right? You got the patriarchs moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him, starting in verse 9 there, and delivered him out of the afflictions, gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Came a dearth over the land, Egypt and Canaan in great affliction, and fathers found no sustenance. Jacob heard that there was no corn, or you could say wheat, right, depending. He sent out his fathers first, and the second time Joseph was made to his brethren. Joseph's kindred was made known unto the Pharaoh, then sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred 70, so you get to 65, and then you've got the addition on for 70. So Jacob went down into Egypt and died, and he and his fathers, and were carried over Shechem, laid in sepulchre that Abraham had bought for a sum of money, and the sons of Amor, the fathers of Shechem. right? But when the time of promise drew nigh, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. See, look at that connection to Abraham there that I mentioned. Right. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to go back here on this. Till another king arose, which knew not Joseph. There's that verse again, right? The same dwelt subtly with our kindred. And that's really what's being referenced here when it says knew not Joseph. And evil entreated our fathers so that they cast their young children to the end that they might not live, talking about the children being tossed into the river, showing that it was indeed they themselves that did it, not the Egyptians that were forcing. It's not the guards went in there and took the children. People actually threw their own in. It says they cast out their young children to the end that they might not live, right? In which time Moshe was born and was exceeding fair and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nourished him up for his own son. Moshe learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, which is interesting, right? We talked about that a little bit with Joseph, although you didn't join me for the Joseph studies, did you?
No.
Maybe I'll have you come in and we'll finish Joseph at some point. And was mighty in words and in deeds. Hey, Jeff, you see something right there?
Absolutely.
And people always say that Moshe felt that he wasn't good at speech, that he had a mumbling and a stutter and things like that. It's often speculated based on a conversation that we're going to go over tonight with the fiery bush scene. Right. But right here it says he was mighty in words and in deeds. And you start to look at what Josephus says about Moshe being raised up to be a general and things like that.
Well, okay, hang on.
Jeff's like, you're going through too much.
No. I take issue with that.
Okay.
There are some people that say that he was raised up to be a general.
Yeah.
If you go back and you really look at what Josephus says there, he was saying that he was being raised up to be the next Pharaoh of Egypt. This also points back to David Roll's information, because the Pharaoh, the person that would have been Pharaoh, was a woman, and then so Moshe would have been favored above her to be the next Pharaoh. So interesting stuff there. But Moshe was being. Go ahead. Especially
if his Egyptian mother's husband was a homosexual. Right?
Yes. That's what. Yeah. So Moses was actually in line to be not a great general. Truly, he was trained up in all the arts, but he was trained and groomed to become the next Pharaoh. So wow, that's very interesting there.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. So verse 23, which is really the point we're really getting at, which is why Jeff knew exactly what verse, even though we didn't discuss this beforehand. And when he was full 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren, the children of Israel, to visit his brethren. It seems like the language there indicates that Moshe knew that he was an Israelite, because that is something that is often argued and speculated. And did Moshe's mom?
Can we just be honest real quick? Most people know the story of Exodus not from reading it. They know it from Charlton Heston. They know it from Yul Brynner. They know it from Cecil B. DeMille's with whichever version of the 10 Commandments. And guys, listen, I like that movie. Praise Yah. I think he did a decent job. Was everything accurate? No, but it's still a decent job going through it. But Moses knew he was a Hebrew. Moses knew who he was, and man, he was being raised up to be the next Pharaoh. And he was raised up with all the knowledge and the wisdom. Interesting enough, the woman that became Pharaoh, because he skipped out originally before we get to kind of Yul Brynner's character, which is not Ramses, but the woman that's raised up, her name is Sobek Hapta, or something like that, and it's literally dealing with the god Sobek, which was a Sobek was an Egyptian god that was an alligator that lived in the Nile. So how poetic was this, that Moses was going to be Pharaoh, and the one that ended up being Pharaoh immediately after the Pharaoh that was around when Moses was being raised up was one that Moses was raised up out of the water, and the next Pharaoh was Sobek Hapta, which was after the Egyptian god Sobek, which was an alligator, was an enemy, kind of, if you will. So representing that, so something that was a danger that was in the Nile. Interesting. Just thought that you'd like to hear that part.
Oh, I missed some of that. I took the opportunity to be able to take a 2-second break when I very much needed it.
Yeah.
It seems like you're on a roll. I will say that as much as I like to look at some of the things of what Josephus says, I am not the one to say that it's 100% accurate.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, and I told you before, right? Yeah. I've had issues with Josephus even in my dreams before I even read about certain stuff. So it's a real interesting relationship I have with the writings of Josephus. But the point we're pointing out here is that Acts 7:23 says he was 40 years old in this situation.
Yep.
Right. So, and it is often said, for anybody who hasn't caught this, Moshe's life can be broken up into 3 sections of 40, and that the number 40 is surrounding Moshe, whether it's going up a mountain or the places that they visited during the amount of years that they were in the wilderness. Right. The number 40 is just constantly around Moshe, but you see that the first 40 would have been raised up in Egypt, right? Up until this point, it says he was fully 40 years old, and seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended him and avenged him that was oppressed and smote the Egyptian. Right. Now look at this, Jeff. Look at this.
Hey, can we go back to where he looked at their burdens? Can we do that real quick?
Go for it.
Looked at their burdens. This phrase means more than just to see, right? It means to see with emotions. We see this like in Genesis 9:16. We also see it in satisfaction. We also see it in Genesis 21:16. I'm trying to go fast. 21:16, guys, go back and look at it. We see that same phrase with distress. Moses here is the one who shares God's heart. He's a prophet. Hello? Prophets share the heart of God. We see in Hebrews chapter 11, 24 and 26, this tells us something that happened in the heart and the mind of Moses as he saw with emotion their burdens. So just real quick, I'm going to read Hebrews 11, 24 and 26. It says, by faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. He looked towards the reward. So again, we see this, that, because sometimes they portray him in the movies like, oh, I didn't know I was a Hebrew. If you look at the Cecil B. DeMille's account, all of a sudden there's the little baby robe that had the Hebrew colors on it, right? That was found and brought before, and he had no idea. Then he runs down to the slave quarters like, my people, But no, that's not how it was. He knew who he was, and when he became of age, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So, and he is using this again. The language there is he is sharing God's heart as he looks on the burdens, and he's seeing it with emotion. So I just want to bring that out real quick.
Nice. I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
That's a good tie-in. Okay, so look at verse 25 here, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right, because we don't get to see this in Exodus.
Right.
Seeing one of them suffer wrong, and defended him and avenged him that was oppressed and smote the Egyptian, for he supposed his brethren would have understood how that Yah by his hand would deliver them.
Yes.
But they understood not.
Right.
Jeff, what? He already had it in his mind. You see that? He had it in his heart and he had it in his mind, and he sees a purpose here that Yah by his hand would deliver them. He was already having hope and faith in that direction.
Right. Yes.
Why don't we ever see that in the Moses movies, Jeff? Why don't we ever see that in the Moses movies, Jeff?
I to be honest, I think it's because everything tries to take out the supernatural part of God. God already speaking to Moses by faith. Moses is already starting to wear that mantle of a prophet, hearing and seeing and feeling the heart of Yah, and seeing the suffering of God, suffering of God's people. What did we hear before? Or talks about the affliction of the people of Israel had come up before Yah, right? Had come up before him. The same thing's going on here with Moses. He is feeling this. He's not only just seeing it, he's feeling it with emotions. And he's hearing from God. And I think that people try to take away the supernatural and say, you know what? If you look at how they portray Moses all the time in different movies, he's like a crazy man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hearing a voice.
Yeah.
Ooh, some kind of thing, right? And they try to, like, this guy's he's nuts. This Moses guy was nuts, and he did all this stuff being nuts. No, I think he was already hearing from God. The Bible says that God talked to him. They were like they're like buddies. They're like, hey, they're talking to like a friend. Same like with Abraham, talking, just
Right.
they got
Right.
they got
Well,
they're this
not at this point though, but
not at this
later
point.
on.
No, I agree with
Right.
not at this point, but I
Right.
think that God is already beginning that relationship with him.
That work on his heart and things.
And he's feeling that. And
Yeah.
And again, he thought that he thought, man, everybody's gonna be like, yeah, let's go, man. Come on, let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
And he probably didn't see how it was going to go down just yet, right? Because we see some doubt and surprise in the next couple chapters here.
Right.
But just the fact that Acts 7 shows that he was already supposing when he killed this Egyptian. This is before he's left Egypt. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the two things I wanted to bring up out of Acts 7. Was there anything else you wanted to bring out of Acts 7, or we can go back to chapter 2?
We're good. We're good.
Okay, so it came to pass in those days, Moshe was grown. He went, and we see in Acts 7, grown means 40 here.
Right.
But he went out into his brethren, right? So when you see the movies and they show him to be like 17,
right?
I'm Jeff. I'm trying
to. It says it right there. He was 40, right?
Right. And then again, if you start questioning what the Bible says about numbers and things, it's real easy to start questioning that all over the place. Okay. So, anyways, he went out to his brethren and looked on their burdens, right? As you mentioned, he spied the Egyptian, smiting the Hebrew, right? Looked this way and that way, made sure nobody was watching. He slew the Egyptian and he buried him, right? He put him in the sand. He didn't just leave the body there. He went out the next day, right? And behold, 2 men of the Hebrews were striving together. And he said to him that did the wrong. So he was watching enough to actually perform some righteous judgment here, something that I don't think is often noticed. But he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? And then Moshe fears and says, surely this thing is known. All right, Jeff, did you come back? Oh, no, he's not back yet. Okay. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moshe, but Moshe fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Okay, we're going to pause right there. I'm going to go back over these few verses here. Okay, so he buries the Egyptian. He went on the second day, and he sees 2 Hebrews striving. As I mentioned, he sees which one did the wrong, because it says he said to him that did the wrong, why are you attacking your fellow? So there is righteous judgment being here. He's asking for an account of the situation. He's trying to, not only does he able to discern with righteous judgment, but he wants to execute righteous judgment. So right there in the situation, he's going to try to get a testimony, a witness from both of the parties and try to mediate. At least that's what it seems like to me. Okay. And the response, look at the attitude of this response. Not you're right, or I shouldn't have been doing this, or I have my reasons. Oh, sorry, I had to bring you back in.
That's all right, man.
Okay. And so, he's look at the response here. He says, who made you a prince and a judge over us?
Right.
Who made you an authority over us? And I think it's funny that we see that term prince and judge here, considering the position of Moshe at that time.
Absolutely. Right.
They're saying, who are you? And it's like, are you kidding me?
I am the prince. Yeah.
Right. But he's coming to them also, as I was pointing out, Jeff, I didn't know if you heard me while you were gone there, but he's coming to them with a Hebrew stance of how to handle righteous judgment. Okay, because it says that he went to the one that did wrong, and he's asking him. So he's asking for an account, right? He's not just attacking. He's discerning righteous, but he's also wanting to execute righteous judgment, and he wants an account to be stated on both ends and hear the matter out. And as I was telling the people, I think he was trying to mediate, Jeff. I think he was trying to get in the middle.
I do too. Yeah, he tried to intervene like in a violent dispute between 2 Hebrew men. He was trying to judge this correctly. From you and I share a lot of similar views. I don't think that the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai may have been the first time they'd ever heard Yah's instructions. We see Abraham following God's instructions, his precepts, his judgments, his
statutes and ordinances.
Yeah. Right. So this is not something new. It's just something maybe kind of forgotten. They've been. How long have they been immersed into Egyptian culture? How much have they taken on? We see the same thing happen to Israel when they're immersed into Babylon. All of a sudden, instead of calling it the first, second, third month, now we've got these crazy names. We have a name for a in the Jewish calendar called Tammuz.
Yeah,
doesn't come from God, right? So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jeff. That's something I wanted to bring up tonight, and I didn't know what verse we were going to discuss that on, but Jeff, we see this here in America, right? where first, second, third generation American, how many generations does it take of being in America before you don't speak your family's language? And I'm not attacking here. I'm second generation American, and I don't speak any of the 5, 6 languages that my mother's mother spoke, right? She could speak Dari, Russian, Farsi. I think she could speak Kurd, right? She had multiple languages. Armenian, Assyrian. I don't speak any of those, Jeff. I speak English. And every once in a while I try to meddle with Hebrew. And then I hope that the Hebrew experts don't come and beat me with a Hebrew club. But, that's something to be considered here. I mean, these are individuals. I'm, as it seems to me, they're over 300 years in captivity at this point, right?
Yeah.
Right. And not all 300 years were captivity, right? As you mentioned, there was a good time where Israel was wealthy and prosperous. I mean, what was it? What was it? Hamp that said, looking at Joseph, today's version, he probably would have been considered not a millionaire, not a billionaire, but a trillionaire when he basically owns everything in Egypt, and there's only one above him. I mean, this is a very wealthy individual who was there with his family, very well established. This would have carried on for multiple generations.
He had a pyramid. Going back, he had a pyramid for a tomb. Yeah. No one else had that except for the pharaohs, and not even all the pharaohs had that.
Right. No, you had to be in good standing and be favored even after you're dead.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's some things that we could mention there, but I mean, right now, right, for just American culture, this would almost be like, this is not the best analogy, but if we start looking at like Paul Revere, right, Washington, Jefferson, whoever you want to point at from a couple hundred years ago, how many teens and college students can you grab today?
Well, hang on, brother. I do have to say something. You know what? If the year was 1492, I don't see any archaeological evidence of George Washington or Paul Revere. I'll leave you with that. There we go.
Okay. We can use whoever, Jeff. I'm trying to get that time frame of a couple of hundred years have passed.
Yeah.
And when we're reading in the literature, a couple hundred years doesn't seem like a lot when we're looking at, well, you're looking at only so many generations, whatever. A lot has changed.
A lot,
Jeff. And how long does it take? And that's why I wanted to point the picture of America here, because it's within a couple of generations. You're not keeping the traditions. You're not keeping the culture. You've lost the language, and you've already become what you're immersed in, what you're surrounded by. You are now. How many times? I used to roll my eyes at this, but when I was in the military, you'd ask people their background, their heritage, their ethnicity, and they would say American. And I said, no, that's your nationality. That's your citizenship. I'm asking, where your family line comes from. And so many of them didn't even know, Jeff. Yeah. And I'm not attacking or pointing fingers at anybody. This is not the most important stuff. I'm just saying it proves that in a matter of just a few generations, so much knowledge and understanding and things to be passed down can be lost. So
we know that they were very familiar with the Egyptian gods, because right as soon as we get past the Red Sea, we build altars to Hathor and what's the other name of the bull?
You don't even have to go all that far, Jeff. While they're in the wilderness, before that point, they're saying that they missed the cucumbers, the melons, and things like this. If you look at that in the Hebrew and you look at what they're talking about, it was a timing clue of like the cakes of Ishtar type of thing. This was were based on the foods of the festivals of the deities of Egypt of that time, right? So it's like, maybe Thanksgiving dinner isn't the best example, but you take any pagan holiday that maybe somebody can relate to, the Christmas ham or whatever, Easter ham,
Easter eggs. How about that?
Easter eggs, whatever you want to use, right?
Yeah.
And you go to leave the land and you're trying to do things differently. And it comes around that time, and in your mind, you're thinking, around this time, we'd be dipping the eggs around the kitchen. We'd be having a good time. And we had some problems, but I missed those eggs. When you say you missed the eggs, you're not talking about just the food.
Right.
You're talking about everything that comes with it. And that was what was being cued in there. So they're definitely in it, Jeff. They know that they're Hebrews, but they've forgotten what it means to be an Israelite. They've forgotten what it means.
I think that's the whole reason that Yah had to step in at Mount Sinai and give the 10 words, and then through that period also expand on it, because they had lost generations of knowledge. I think I don't really hold to the whole 613 count. I think that's just odd,
Oh,
especially
yeah.
when you go through there, you see so many duplications and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I believe that they went through and they lost so much knowledge that had already been gained, handed down from Adam to to Noah to Abraham all the way down, and then they get into this place, and like you say, they get into this cultural melting pot, and they just melt away. And I think this is some of the reason that y'all allow some of the slavery and things like this. This was a punishment, much like we see Israel all the way through. When they start adopting the ways of the nations, what happens, right?
Yeah.
Hey, they were living great for a while, but then what happened? I think they started adopting the ways of the pagan, and they had to be go. They allowed some judgment to come here. So
Sure.
anyway, yeah.
Okay, so back to verse 14 here. Who made a prince and a judge over us, right? Look at the attitude you see there when he's trying to execute. And you got to think, based on what Acts 7 says, Moshe had it in the mind that Israel is going to be unified and delivered, and the hand of God's going to step in. And he kills this Egyptian thinking that this is going to spark that revolution to stand up, rise up, move out together, however that's going to look. Yah's got his thing. Moshe just wants to be a part of it. And the very next day, the Hebrews are fighting with each other. Hey, we can't be divided. What are you doing? We're trying to get ready to get up out of here. So, what he was hoping for and expecting, and then he sees the exact opposite. Must have been heartbreaking. So Pharaoh hears this thing and he seeks to slay Moses. We see in other verses.
Hang on one thing. Can we make another tie into with Moses and Yeshua, Moses and Jesus here? They were both rejected in their right to be prince and a judge over Israel.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
So go ahead. All right.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pharaoh hears this thing and he seeks to slay Moshe. We know in other verses later that it's not just the Pharaoh. But Moshe fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. So there you have that well picture that I have mentioned in many verses or in many videos talking about Jacob and Joseph and all these other individuals that you keep seeing these iconic scenes. John chapter 4, around a well where water is to be drawn. Jeff? Right?
Yeah.
Right? And there's all kinds of things there. Okay, so the priest of Midian, who had 7 daughters, came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, right? Apparently this was a common thing because it later on says Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to their father, right, that Jethro, Reuel, how is it that you come so soon today? Right. Usually it takes you, hours longer, right?
Right.
And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds. Look, they refer to him as an Egyptian. And also drew water enough for us and watered the flocks. Right? So right away, we're seeing some spiritual things here. He's representing that he's being used to provide spiritually as well as physically. This is not the first time that Moshe, drawn from water, draws out water for others, or is used to draw out water for others, both physically and spiritually. Right? So you have that watering of the flock. Peter, if you love me, tend my sheep. Peter, if you love me, tend my sheep. Right?
Yeah.
And it was the sheep keepers, according to Genesis, that the Egyptians had an issue with. Right? And I think you and I have talked about this before, and I've done it in other videos talking about how often we see that. We talk about this in the Genesis 4. How your position, not just your name, but your title, your position, keeper of the sheep. What is that referencing? You've got Peter, keep my sheep, feed my sheep. Take care of my sheep. Tend the flock if you love me, right? And so we see Moshe tending the flock, right? And so the dad says to the daughters, "Where is he? Why is it that you left the man?
Yeah.
Call him to eat bread with us. Bring him in." So Moshe was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moshe Zipporah his daughter. He must have liked him back, right?
Just one more tie-in with the he also drew enough water for us and watered the flock. I see another tie-in too. May shock you. How about Rebecca?
Yeah, Rebecca.
Isaac and Rebecca, right?
Yeah, I've mentioned that.
Again, these are all things that are pointing towards someone called out, someone set apart, someone doing more than enough, right? So I just see that. But go ahead.
No, you're right. Yeah, Rebecca is usually one of the ones I bring up. I'm glad you brought her up. So Zipporah, right? bears Moshe a son and calls him Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. Right?
Yep.
Did you have something you wanted to do on that?
No.
I just think it's funny because you have the Israelites in Egypt, right?
Yeah.
And then he comes out of Egypt, and now he's calling himself a stranger in a strange land. There's some funny things there, but again, also foreshadowing, right?
Right.
So it came to pass in the process of time that the king of Egypt died. Okay. Talking about the king at the beginning of Exodus.
Yep.
So whoever's view this is, now that king is dead. Okay, Jeff, it's simple, but how many times do we see even scholars and books, not just movies, not just TV shows? We're not talking just cartoons. We're not talking Sunday school, Jeff. We're talking not even pastors and teachers and preachers. We're not talking YouTube teachers. We're talking scholars,
PhDs,
piece of paper on the wall. Right. And I'm not attacking that. I'm not saying that it's good for nothing or whatever. I've got plenty of friends that are doctors and people who aren't friends that are doctors that are very intelligent people. I'm not attacking that. I'm just saying these are individuals who got the certificate that said, I know what I'm talking about pertaining to this topic.
Right.
And then they proceed to tell you that it's Ramses, that it's the first Ramses, and that it's the first Ramses all the way through. And I'm sitting there going, Jeff, how is that any of those possible? The more I look at this, the more I'm going, I don't see any of that being possible.
Absolutely.
So for anybody who hasn't caught it before, anybody that it's new to this, or maybe they're not new to this, and Yah has just highlighted other portions of Exodus for them in their walk, and perhaps you missed this. The king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, had died. This is the one that would have been in charge, at least for some time in Moshe's life. I mean, we can speculate because it is speculation on, depending on, if there had been more than one, and there are beliefs during certain time periods that I don't agree with, but if they line it up, that there would have been 3 pharaohs at this point. One for 2 years, one for 6, 10. And then the other one is 66 or something. Yeah, 10 and then 66. You know what I'm talking about. And that lines up with your second Ramses.
Right.
But I personally disagree with that. But anyways, so we have the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of bondage, not because the king died, right? And they cried, and their cry came up to Yah by reason of the bondage.
Yes.
God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, Yitzhak, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Yah looked upon the children of Israel, and Yah had respect unto them. Okay, do you have anything to say on that before we go into chapter 3?
I think let's go into chapter 3. You could say some stuff on that but I think we've already talked about the emotion. It's still the same thing coming up to God again. And I think we kind of covered that a little bit.
Okay. Are you sure? Because if you want to emphasize, I'll walk away for 2 seconds because I'm about to walk away either way.
Go ahead. I'll talk about this. I'll talk about this. When it says that God heard their groaning and God remembered. So in other words, if Moses forgot about Israel while he was being in Egypt, God hasn't. So it's a little bit of making sure that the reader knows that God had not forgotten. Moses may have went on with his life, but God had remembered. When it says Israel groaned because of the bondage, there's Kaiser quotes this, and there's a scholar that talks about this. Says you could word that as misery had finally found a voice. Interesting stuff there. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God did not turn his attention to Israel because they were such good people. Come on. They weren't just such good people, but because he had made a covenant with them through Abraham. He gives his love and attention to us. Again, I try to bring things back to a practical place. God gives us his love and attention on the same basis, not because we're good people. The Bible says, how many is good? No, not one. Even the best of us are not good enough to deserve God's love and his attention. However, he gives his love and attention to us on the same basis. The covenant relationship we have through Yah, through Yeshua. I'm just saying God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not because of their good works, but because of the covenant that God had given Abraham. Same thing with us today. Why does God love us? He loves us because and through that covenant relationship we have with him through Yeshua. So those are some things I brought out. There we go. Chapter. Okay. Do you got anything else?
No, I see the chat's talking about Jesh and Jubilees, and there's some things in there, and maybe we'll discuss it in the next couple of videos. But I don't know about you, Jeff, but me personally, I like Jasher, I like Jubilees, but I don't see them in scripture. I see some issues here and there.
Yeah.
I would say the same with Enoch 1. And so because of that, I like to look at those things, but I don't treat it the same way that I'm treating Genesis and Exodus. So there's a reason why I haven't brought some of that stuff up, but I thought maybe we would in the next video or two, depending on how Yah leads. I'm ready for chapter 3 if you are, man. We are.
And I am.
We've been pushing it and we've been trucking it. I know you and I are both going, man, we're going through things fast. But
I feel like we're on a roller coaster.
But I know it. But we're right on time for where we were hoping for. So that shows this is the pace we have to keep in if we're going to try to do the timeline that we're doing. Okay, so chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moshe kept the flock right there. Moshe kept the flock. He went from watering them to keeping them. He went from resting at the well, the source of the provision, right, to actually keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. And kind of like a nod back to Jacob with Laban, right? I mean, again, there's so many nods to Genesis for many reasons.
I look at this as Moses's real training ground. He's been trained up to be a leader. Now he's being trained up to be a shepherd. So this is his past. This is him going to seminary. This is him going to learn how to pastor, I guess. That's a modern thing. I'm just kidding.
No, he's pastoring. That's where we get the word, and I know you know that. But here's the funny thing is like, talk about a change of scenery, right? And he chose, and yes, there was a fear, the fleeing because of the murder, right? But we could have easily seen this as he tried to rally up the Israelites and tried to save himself and hunker down in the town. We can take over things like that, but instead he took off. And when he took off, there had to be this understanding of I am leaving what I have known, the luxury I've known, whether you believe it was, the northern or southern, whether you believe it was the upper or the lower. Yes, I did that on purpose, right? The upper and the lower kingdoms of Egypt, because they have that understanding that if he was from the upper part, that he would have been visiting the lower, and that's why they wouldn't have recognized him necessarily, and all these other different things. Again, maybe we'll get into that next video next week, but look at what the change here, right? You always have the prince and the pauper, right? They're from the rags to the riches, Hadassah to Queen Esther, right?
Right.
Well, with Moshe right now in this point of his life, at his third segment of his life, right? He went from prince, ruler, and judge to shepherd. Right. And this is a position that the culture he would have been raised in would have seen as an abomination. They look at what Joseph told his brethren and instructing them when they came to Egypt. He said, tell them you're a shepherd. And I thought it was such a cool thing. He said, tell them, that's all you've known, that's what you've done since your life. And he wasn't instructing them to be deceitful or to lie. It was a true statement, but he was emphasizing, stick to this career path. I've got it made for you. We've got this land of Goshen. We've got this the best land, right? Which again lines up with a virus in a lot of ways to where you and I, we have our reasons why we think it's not just an awesome documentary series. There's other stuff to it, even things that they didn't bring up. When you dive in deep, but he told them to be the shepherds. You're not going to be forced into manual labor that is outside of things. You're going to have your Shabbats off. You're going to be left alone. You're going to be able to eat kosher, biblically clean. You're going to be able to do the things that Yah leads you to do. And you're not going to be strained. You're not going to be getting whipped with things, at least in the beginning.
Right.
If you're the shepherd off in the distance, the Egyptians disliked shepherds so much that they wouldn't sit and eat a meal with them. Look at what it says in Genesis with Joseph and his brethren and things. They will not sit and eat a meal with you. They see you as smelling like the cattle, right? Yeah. And there's all kinds of things. They see you as like
you're unclean to them.
Yeah, you are. I mean, it's not like you're a leper, but at this situation, it's like you chose to live in rags. You are the one who's sitting on the corner of the street with a tin can, begging for money, and you don't have broken legs. That's how they viewed the shepherds. So look at what Moshe is going through here, and what must be going on in his mind and his heart, and you have a complete change over. Yeah. Right? He's given up his palace for fields and flocks. Where kind
of like he was born again.
Yeah, a whole new, situation here. A turning of the page. That first 40, right? Yeah. You've got the Ethiopian women Yeah, and there's arguments too about the Ethiopian woman if there's multiple wives there or if it's just referring to the same one over and over again. But again, we're not going to get into Abraham and his stuff. This is Exodus, right? We've already mentioned Abraham a little bit. Okay, so I just wanted to get that whole keeping the flock thing on what must have been going on in his mind and his heart as well as what's being represented spiritually. And he's showing servitude and humility, serving and keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert, right, and came to the mountain of God, which he wouldn't have understood to be the mountain of God anyways, to Horeb, right? Okay, so it says in the King James, it says, the angel of Yahovah appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush, and he looked and beheld the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Okay, quick question, Jeff. You know what I'm going to ask, right?
Go ahead.
Okay, so when it says the angel of Yah, are we talking an actual angel? Are we talking an angel who is always the spokesperson who does the voice for Yah, who speaks on the behalf, or are we talking Yeshua? What is your beliefs here?
So I definitely know there's some dear brothers that I consider brothers that believe that this is strictly an Elohim, that's just strictly an angel that has agency for Yehovah. But I believe that this is Yehovah. I believe that this is pre-incarnate Yeshua showing up here in the burning bush. And I definitely have my reasons for it. But that's where I come down at. I think this is because we see some evidences that I see later on, not only here, but later on, and I think in verse 4. Going down, but anyway, a couple different places that I think this is Yah speaking through Yeshua, pre-incarnate Yeshua. That's what I see.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to see what your views were on that. This is one of those ones like when you see like Jacob wrestling, I believe that was Yeshua. When you have in Genesis and it says Yah walked in the midst of the day, in the cool of the day, I believe that was Yeshua. When it says that there was an entity in the fiery furnace, I believe that was Yeshua. Yeah. And there's some other things like that. But in this situation, I'm not staking my ground. I guess where I'm at right now, I mean, Yeshua is the word, right? Yeah. So I could see why that would be him.
Yeah, I see Yeshua, the couple of folks that I've heard talk about agency and stuff like this. So I believe that when Yah opened his mouth in creation. I'll just throw it out there, let people know where I stand. I believe that when Yah opened his mouth in creation and began to create, Genesis 1:1, not even Genesis 1:3, in Genesis 1:1, when he began to create, I believe as he opened his mouth, as the Father opened his mouth and began to speak those vibrations, that was the Word becoming flesh right then. Yeshua coming out of the Father. It's not that the Father created him. It's not that he's a created being. He came out from the Father right then and began to create, and through him and by him, all things were created and all things are held together and all things consist. Yeah. I believe right here, we see that voice of Yah, that word of Yah coming out and speaking from the burning bush. That's what I think.
Okay. I wanted to get your input. I'm not disagreeing with you.
And I'm okay. I'm okay if someone believes this is just an angel with agency. I am not going to say that you're not a brother and that you're teaching false doctrine. How about that?
Yeah. No, I usually find it interesting. Like I said, this is one of those ones that I don't stake in the ground because I do find it interesting when they talk about there being a specific angel that had the position of speaking on behalf of Yah. I do tend to lean towards Yeshua on these types of things, but at the end of the day, this is one of those ones where I'm a little bit more likely to say, it could be either way,
It could be either way, and like I say, I don't think that's a salvation issue at all, but that is where I stand. But
okay, I just wanted to get your input.
Just like the sacred name stuff, I still consider those folks brothers, and I'm not saying you're going to hell because you didn't believe what I said. So there we go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I had mentioned this earlier, being Abraham. And no, he's right. Moshe had this as well, and they were complaining, and that was the issue that they had with Moshe, was the Ethiopian woman. But again, there's an argument of if that was another new wife or actually Keturah, and you've got the Midianite actually situation connected to things. There's all kinds of different beliefs and arguments on that. So again, not going to even get into that. At least not tonight. If you wanted to get into that another night, we could, although I don't see it coming up. I believe that topic would be for that portion when Aaron and Miriam have their problem. So if we ever get to do that, that'd be a good time to really dive into that. We can go through all the details of Midianites. Who were they not? Differing views and things like that. And can you connect them to Ethiopia and stuff like that and the different views? And then you've got, like I said, Jasher and Jubilees have some. Well, Jasher, anyways. I don't know about Jubilees.
We are on the road to Pesach, Passover. Let's.
Right. I know. We got to get there. There's already been some things in the chat where I was like, oh, we'll get there when we get to the verse, because people are like, oh, this didn't happen yet, and the other one's like, yeah, it did. And I'm like, we'll get there. Trust me. We have a point to get there. Hang in there. Okay. Okay. So he sees the bush burning with fire, but the bush is not consumed. Oh. Does this mean that there's no smoke, Jeff?
Oh.
You ever think about that? There's no smoke. So yeah. Smoke, right?
Smoke means things are being consumed.
Right? Yeah. So you have the testing, the trial, right?
Right.
This is not a testing. This is not a trial, right?
Yeah.
You have the lifting up of prayers of incense, rising up, the smell. There's no need for ascension because it's coming from the highest, Jeff. So I think that's one of the reasons why we see, on top of the fact that it's going to get his attention if it's burning, but it's not burning.
So when Yeshua talks about your works being judged, and what works remain? The ones that are pure, right? So had this bush done anything wrong? No, this bush was something that was pure, that Yah was occupying, and its works were being perfect because it was a place to hold the habitation of Yah. And man, so it's not being burned up. I don't know. Let's throw that in there. That's my thought. Good thing. But yeah, so the bush wasn't consumed.
Right. Yeah, and Moshe said, I will now turn aside, right? And you've got that language there, turn aside, kind of like the repenting, turning to face the Father, right?
Yeah.
Or agency, however you want to look at that for anybody who's like, oh, you can't face the Father without dying. I'm not,
yeah.
I'm just saying he's turning towards the Father, right?
Yeah, that's another reason I think it's Yeshua, but pre-incarnate, because you can see him, but
right, which is a whole nother. You're going to get the Unitarian versus Trinitarian argument going on.
Oh, they're going to hammer me, brother, but bring it on. It's all good.
Okay. So he turns aside and says, "I see this great sight. Why the bush is not burnt?" Right. So that's going to catch your attention. You see something.
It's a magnet. It is. I mean, gosh, if listen. Okay, this is a desert. Okay.
Yeah.
This is a desert. Can we just be clear with this? It is not uncommon. I would say it's not uncommon. It's not like super common, but it's not uncommon for you to be like out shepherding and all of a sudden something just catches on fire. The heat, we're talking heat magnified down on a cloudless day or whatever, so that's not uncommon. What is uncommon is the thing's not burning up. And again, like you say, there's no smoke.
Yeah, there's no consumption and there's no smoke. That's one of the first things I came across. I said, there was no smoke. And then it hit me. It goes, there was no smoke, Jeff. When you notice it, there was no seeing it from afar off, Jeff. He would have had to been close before he saw it. He would have had to draw nigh before he could see it.
Yeah.
He would have seen that there is no a blanketing of the imagery. He would have seen that it's unusual, it's peculiar, it pulls you in, draws you in, right? Yeah. And there's no need for ascension because it's coming on from up high. Those are my notes on the bush not burning. Okay, so
I got another note on the bush, just a real quick note, not anything real super deep, but the word they're used for bramble, it means to stick or to prick. All right, nice. So and this, I tie this in with Yeshua on the cross. What did they have around him?
Sure,
they crown of thorns sticking and pricking him. Sure. And I see some tie-ins there.
Okay, so when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out into the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe. There's that Moshe, Moshe, Samuel, Samuel, Jacob, Jacob. Right?
Man, you texted me the other night and we were guys, you don't know this. I get a text from Ian. He types Jonah. There we go.
Yeah. We talked about that in the Jonah movie. I wrote the Jonah because he gets called a second time, and I saw that as an example. And I think I mentioned that in the video, but yeah, Moshe. And it's funny how sometimes the most severe callings we see biblically, we see the name is twice. There's an emphasis there.
Yeah.
Like we talked about with the patterns of repeating and things like that. Yeah, ram caught in the bramble. There you go.
There we go.
Ram caught in the bramble. And you've got that reference there too, because that ram is representing a sacrifice for atonement. You've got that replacement, right? And he goes to say you're giving your son.
And Chad, what Chad is saying there is so true. They didn't have an underline. These were all capital letters, right? So that they didn't have a way to shout it out. So they would oftentimes repeat it. Yeah. So Chad, you're absolutely right. So shout it out. It's you're saying it twice. That's like Yeshua saying, "For verily, verily, I say unto you," right? Or like truly I say unto you. Really, like Yeshua's going to lie to us? No, he is really saying that to emphasize and drive home the point.
Sure. Oh yeah, that's an awesome point. Notice that phrase is verily, verily I say unto you. I'm not going to get into it, but I'm just saying. Okay, I respect individuals on both sides. I respect everybody on both sides. I really do, and I see brethren on both sides. Yeah. I've also been seeing the other side. And the side that you and I tend to sit on with this fence has been not voicing lately. So I've been feeling a little bit led on being respectful, but also pointing out things, because maybe if we point it out enough, at least they'll think that we're not completely ignorant, as it seems to be that's typically often how it seems. Again, that's just how I'm perceiving it. I'm not attacking anybody or saying anything about anybody or putting words in anybody's mouth. Okay, so he said, "Here am I."
Yeah.
Here am I. Isn't that Hineni? Hineni, right? When he calls Samuel, when he calls Hene. Yeah. When he calls who am I thinking of? Isaiah.
Yeah.
Hineni, here am I. Send me, I will go.
Yeah.
Right? When Yahovah saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the midst of the bush and said, "Moshe, Moshe." And his response is, "Here am I." Okay, so that shows a default status. That shows where his heart and his spirit's at, even though his mind is not necessarily there, right?
Yeah. Well, okay, so we see, so like you say, it's an urgency. Like, how about when God called Abraham? Genesis 22:11. Abraham. You mentioned Samuel. How about Luke 22:31? I took your double call and I looked up a couple more. Martha.
Oh. There you go. Nice.
How about Acts 9:4? Saul. There we go.
No.
I don't know if you had
Saul. Yeah. No, I don't know if I had it in that post that I brought up to your attention. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if Saul was in there, but that's a good one.
Yeah.
Saul, why really... thou kickest it against the pricks?
Yeah. So anyway, just
okay.
Guys, we gotta hurry. We're trying to get past this. Stop making us slow down. There we go.
Oh no, we're doing really good, Jeff. I'm really surprised with us. It's been feeling like we've been rushing it, but we're doing really good. Yeah. Okay, so he said, "Draw not nigh hither. Don't come any closer. Put off your shoes from off thy feet," which we see echoed later with Joshua, right?
Yeah.
"For the place whereon thou standest is holy ground." This is holy ground, right?
Yeah.
Moreover, he said, I am the Elohim of your father. I'm the Elohim of Abraham, of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, the Elohim of Yaakov, Jacob. Yeah. And Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God, right? Which, that can be viewed as an argument towards it not being an angel, or, can be viewed as just terminology, and you can always say translation, transliteration, and things of that nature.
Right.
But I'm just saying there's differing views as to whether or not that's a point of something. So Yahovah says, right, and we have whoever's speaking on behalf of, as of, right? Yeah. "I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Mitzrayim in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. I am coming down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of the land unto a good land, and a large, and unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites."
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to keep going here, and then we'll pause here in a second and kick back a little bit. "Now, therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come unto me, and I have seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you unto Pharaoh, that thou may bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim. And Moshe said unto God, Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt?" Okay, we're going to pause right there. Real quick, first off, who for the first time, you don't have to raise a hand, who for the first time is seeing that Moshe was actually told a little bit of the plan ahead of time? And there's a lot of that. We're going to be getting into that in the next couple chapters, that Moshe is a lot more aware of what's going on before it's going on. And again, we don't see that in the movies. We don't see that in the cartoons. We don't see that in Sunday school, and we don't always see it in the pulpit, Jeff.
I go back to some of those movies where not even the Charlton Heston version, there's a different one with about the 10 Commandments. And literally it is like this guy is it's just like he's done a lot of crack or something like this, and he's out of his mind, hearing voices, and he's acting all wavy and everything like this, and somebody's saying something, and no, God was speaking to him. And I just have to say that it it says, and Yehovah said, I'm just throwing it out there. There, verse 7. There you go. Yehovah said.
Right.
And it's the same person that was just talking. So anyway, so so he is giving this plan. He's giving this plan to Moses in advance. And we know that I don't know. We know that God is allowing these things to come to Moses to give him faith, because faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Yeshua said this. He said, look, behold, I'm telling you this beforehand, so that when you see it coming to pass, you'll have faith. You'll be of good cheer. So these are some things that I think that God is giving him. I don't think God gave him everything, but I think that God is giving him enough of the plan that as these things come to pass, more and more faith is going to rise in Moses' heart, because God knows he needs that faith. Let's just kind of go back from all that. Why does God even need Moses? How about that? God chooses to work with us. God could do it all by himself, right? But it's most often the plan that God uses to work with and through his people, right? We're supposed to be workers together with him. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1. We are workers together with him. And I think that's something that we need to understand. I think we touched on it while we were going through the book of Esther. What's the importance of prayer? Prayer is us getting us lined up with Yah and his will, waiting to receive those instructions, or praying those things that Yah puts on our heart to help bring those things to pass. So there's a correlation here that I wanted to throw out there. God giving this plan, God even bringing Moses into the picture at all, is typical of his behavior, of God's behavior. He wants us to work with him.
Yeah, he's an active Yah.
Yeah,
he's an active. This is why, Jeff, he will give us things personally if we have a personal relationship with him, but he will also use others to show us things. Why have teachers, preachers, pastors, researchers, whatever, when everything can just be downloaded directly? Because then it doesn't unify the body. Then there is, he likes to be active. He likes to have that relationship with us, and then through us. So you're right. He does want that participation. It's part of that love. When he was going through creation, he saw that it was good, right? And then when he makes mankind, he saw that it was very good. He knew what he had in mind. And it's like when you have a pet and stuff, you don't just want to love your pet from afar. That's why we call them pet, right? It's so you've got, that's probably not the best analogy when you got situations like family. That's a good point. Okay, so I just wanted to point out that he's showing them, I'm going to take you to a promised land, that it's going to be a prosperous land. And he's already telling them, look, it's the place of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. You think Moshe was like, who are they?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
do you think he's declaring the end from the beginning right here?
Oh, in many ways. In many ways, Jeff. But look at the immediate, right?
Yeah.
He's telling him, look, I'm taking you to a land, and it's a lush, wonderful land, right? Mm-hmm. But he's also telling him there's inhabitants there whose names have a reputation that precedes them that you're aware of. Right. So Moshe already is receiving this understanding of he wants to take the Israelites out of Mizraim. He wants to pull them out, take them to another land where there's already inhabitants that are not known to be the nicest tribes and nations, right?
Yeah, because Moses was trained up with all the political knowledge, all the historical. We even read. We actually, if I remember right, in the patterns of Exodus, that Moses actually may have led one or two battles for Egypt. So that's an interesting little tidbit there before he.
Right. I think Josephus and Jasher talk about that as well.
Right.
Again, I don't see it in the Canaanites, so I don't weigh too much heavily on it, but it is definitely a possibility. That's why I brought up the general thing. I think the thing I found that most interesting about that is it shows that he would have familiarity with moving the logistics of moving large. Yeah. I mean, I know only two of the original millions actually get to cross the river, right? I mean, you got a bunch other than them, but from the original group, there's only the two.
Hang on. In the chat, name the two original ones that came out of Egypt that actually got to go in the promised land. That's a good question. Carry on, though, brother.
You're trying to quiz people? You're trying to give them homework while they're listening?
Involved, man. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to bring up that it's already showing Moshe that there's enemies to be had here, right? That there's going to be some conflicts, some confrontation. You're not going to tell them, look, I'm going to take you to a land that's lush and wonderful, and it's going to be your land. Oh, by the way, there's these tribes who some of them have had giants and things like this. You're not going to be told these things and not automatically think, especially, I mean, again, Moshe's 40, not 17. Moshe's been, it says that he was trained up in all the knowledge of Egypt. Again, not a 17-year-old who's just an angsty teen and decided to water some flocks that he decided to sit by a well by. This is an individual who's had some time, has had some maturity, and he's very well knowledge and quite possibly very experienced as well. Yep. So he's already going to be thinking battles, right? Now, therefore, behold the cry. Okay, so he talks about the cries rising up to the Father, right? Which is one of the reasons why I wanted my wife to put that into the intro there, getting that in there.
I really like that.
Yeah, I like that too, right? I felt like that was spirit-led. It was nice. Yeah. So here's something I want to highlight here. In verse 11, Moshe said to Yah, who am I that I should go into Pharaoh, that I should bring forth children? Okay, I actually wrote one of our WordPress blogs titled, Who Am I? Okay. Look at Moshe's response here. Who am I? Yah said, these are my plans. This is what I'm going to do. Yah, I'm going to bring the Israelites out. Right. And I'm going to bring them to this land and things like this. And you're going to lead them. And Moshe's response is, who am I? Okay. There's some layers here, Jeff. First off, Moshe is stuck on the vessel. Okay. I've had moments in my walk, Jeff, where I've said this to the Father. And this is why I had that sermon that I wrote out, the who am I? Because, I felt led to do something. And I was like, man, there's people who are way more knowledgeable. Jeff, you and I, we like to study these things, but we can find people, maybe even a couple in the chat, that have studied this for years more than we, and they have some head knowledge that we can't compare to and stuff like that. So it's easy to simply have those moments.
I tell that to my wife all the time. I'm like, my gosh, I see some of these other teachers, and I just think, man, I don't know anything.
Yeah,
you right. Just look at me like,
And you're sitting there going, why even bother? You're looking at the vessel, and and in those mindsets, you're sitting there thinking, I just don't want to mess it up. I don't want to have speech problems. I can't speak. I'm not good enough. Who am I, right? And I've had these moments where I'm like, man, there's better qualified, right? There are those with better experience, and in your mind in those moments, at least for me, you're thinking, this is me being humble. This is me trying to be realistic, pragmatic, right? And then when you get corrected, it's not hey, you're being negative. Chin up, I got you. But the response I got from the Father was, why are you trying to get in the way? And I said, what are you talking about? And he says, what makes you think that you're so powerful and so mighty that you could even mess up my plans to begin with? And I'm like, no, I'm not saying I'm mighty. I'm saying I'm not, and that's why you don't use me. And the Father says, yeah, but you think you can mess it up after I told you to do something. What makes you think you're that powerful? And it like a whole shift in my understanding of things. Of it's not about the vessel. It's not about what we perceive of whether it's good enough or not. When you get called and get led by the Father, it is the glory to Him because He's the one leading it and doing it and guiding it.
Yeah, that's like something someone told me a long time ago when I first got ministry. He was like, Jeff, if God calls you to do something, He is going to back it up. We see in the Gospels that signs and wonders would follow those that believe. I'm kind of getting ahead of us a little bit here, but Yah tells Moses, I'm going to be with you. I think it says, I will certainly be with you. And that's something that we need to understand is that, and I like how you worded that, is God so small that we can mess up His plans? Maybe that's kind of a different way to word what you said, but is He so small that we can mess His plans up? And I agree. I would beg to differ. Just like with Esther or Hadassah, if she had not gotten to that place that she needed to be, Mordecai's like, hey, God will raise up somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. So same thing here, with Moshe, I think,
yeah, if he hadn't stood up to do it, would have been Aaron.
Yeah.
Rome. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not.
Well, what about when all the Israelites mess up and God's like, look, we'll wipe the floor
Oh, I
with them. And
know it.
I'll just start over with you, out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Oh
hey,
my gosh. Oh my
that'll
gosh.
still be, we'll figure it out. It'll be good. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, look at what Yeshua said. He
Yeah.
said, "Say not within yourselves that you're the children of Abraham, for he can raise an inheritance out of the stones."
Out of the rocks.
You know,
Yeah.
the Father's going to do his thing. Either be a part of it or get out of the way. You know, but that's the thing is the point is that Moshe's look, it's his flesh and his heart and his mind and his spirit are all in this position of looking at the vessel. We're all guilty of doing this from time to time. I was
just going to say, don't be hate. People don't hate on Moses. How would you feel if you're standing there? You've got this bush that's burning, right? A voice comes out of this bush, says to take off your sandals, go hide your face over in this rock. So when I walk past you, all this kind of stuff, we got all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And he's hearing all this stuff, and then God's like, hey, I'm gonna take you out. We're gonna lead out the people. We're gonna go take back Canaan. You're gonna go up against the giants, all this stuff. Rah, 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 rah. It's gonna be great. And Moses is like, dude, you got the wrong guy. That's how I would be. I'd be like, oh, that sounds really great. Call Ian over there. He's the guy. He's the guy. He's young.
Yeah. Oh,
he doesn't have, he talks better than I do. All this stuff. Man, I'd be throwing it all on you, man. Yeah.
Better not be. What makes you think I won't just beat you to it? No, but that's the thing though. He's looking at the vessel, right? He's looking at himself.
Yeah.
Yah's saying what he plans to do. And like you mentioned, that great point. Whether Moshe was going to stand up or not, Yah's going to do his thing.
Yeah.
It's not about the vessel. So I find that very interesting. And I want to encourage the listener to think about that. If you feel led, it says test the spirits in scripture, make sure things like that. You're praying for guidance, but also praying, believing, not doubting, not wavering in faith and things like this. You start feeling guided and urged, and you got your confirmations or then remember, it's not about the vessel. It's not about the vessel, and it's not about the appearance of the vessel. It's not about how well you sound or anything like that. You could be a whitewashed tomb and have the appearance.
How old do you think Moses is here?
And well, at this point, I mean, he's past 40, but we'll get to the next number of when he goes back. But Jeff, is there some time lapse here? It wouldn't be very much, but there would be some time lapse, right?
Yep. Yeah. He's already gotten in good. He's gotten married. He's had a kid. There's some years.
Yes.
That's going on here.
Well, we'll get to it, Jeff. I don't know if we're getting to it tonight or if it's the next. I think it might be the next chapter that gives us that number. So we'll leave that be. Anybody who wants to read ahead, they can do that or whatever. But yeah, there's some time here, and that's a good point too, because 40 is when he left. 40 would not have been the age of this scene right here.
Right.
Because I do believe there's some time from when he had this conversation to before he went back.
Yeah.
But I mean, to assume that it's a very long time, I think would be also silly. So that's a really good point you bring up there. Okay. So he said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Who am I to be in this position? Mm-hmm. Right. And it's like, who better in terms of like you were in a position of authority. You know what I mean? But it's like, whatever. Okay, so he said, certainly I will be with thee. There it is, Jeff. Certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token to you. And this is, remember I told you this was one of the ones I wanted to bring up and highlight, because I think nobody ever talks about this. I don't ever remember hearing this in a sermon. Not that it's not done. I just don't ever hear it. This shall be a token to you that I have sent you. This is for Moshe specifically, personally. This is Yah giving Moshe this as a sign. When thou hast brought people forth, the people out of Egypt, when you've completed that task that you're already questioning, you shall serve Yah upon this mountain.
Yeah.
So that's his first sign for him. There's other signs that we'll get into in the next video, right? That are meant for the others and that are meant for convincing. And then there's signs for the Pharaoh, and there's signs for the Egyptians. There's signs. If you look through Exodus in these 14 chapters that we're going to be discussing. There's signs for everybody, Jeff. Everybody gets a sign. You get a sign, I get a sign, he gets a sign, we get a sign. Everybody gets a sign, Jeff. Right? And this is the first sign we see being referenced to Moshe personally. When you bring them out of Egypt, not if, it's a when. When you bring them out of Mizraim, you shall serve Yah upon this mountain. Not that you shall just come to it, Look at what is being declared, prophesied, however
Right.
you want to view that. You will serve Elohim upon this mountain, right? And that's a sign there. And you got to think it takes some faith going through everything that he gets to until that happens, right? And then when he finally gets to that point, we get to see the number 40s again, right? Oh. Right, Jeff. This is where that's chapter 2 going into chapter 3 of Moshe's life right there. Right. Okay, so Moshe said to God, "Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me unto you, they shall say to me, what's his name? What shall I say unto them?" Right? So he's aware, right? He talked about how he believed that God would purpose these things. Yeah. But his experience, his knowledge, and his training is in what, Jeff? His 40 years of being raised is in what, Egypt. Jeff? Right? Yeah. You know, so I mean, you've got all kinds of things going on here. So he's saying, who should I say that you are, so that they know that I'm not just, so they know I'm not Joseph Smith. So they know that I'm not Muhammad. So they know that, all the list of the people who couldn't pass the Matthew 4 test of being led into the wilderness. They get tempted by an evil spirit that claims to be an angel, because it once was, that offers them the world, right? Because they all had those tests, Muhammad, Joseph Smith, and the other one, right? They all had those tests. And they came back talking about gold tablets and secrets being whispered to their ears by, even Muhammad had treasure that he hid and stuff like that. But anyhow, so God said to Moshe, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you. Okay, Jeff, I asked you before this video. I said I had one thing to say about this. And I said, Jeff, do you have more? And you took my one thing and you said, I don't know. And they said, oh, wait. And then you had this whole spiel. You said, I don't know. And then you basically recited a whole chapter. So I'm passing the baton to you.
So when we get here, some people actually think that this I am that I am is the name of God. And that's what his name is. And so, and I don't want to get necessarily into that here, because we see in the next couple verses down that we see that it goes back to Yehovah. But what we see here is Ihye Asher Ihye. And that's what we see in the Hebrew. And when many of you guys, if you're new to listening to me, I actually took a course in Hebrew from the Hebrew University, and this was something that we really discussed a lot of. Is the haye, which is the verb to be. Now we discussed it a little bit with the creator, but we actually used the haya, the verb to be, to go through the different the different tenses of the verb in the Hebrew language. And so literally you get when it says this Ihye Asher Ihye, it's literally I am who I am. It's this word to be. It gets into the I am, I was, I will be. There's that 3 that we get into. It talks about the 3. I am, I was, I will be. Gosh, that reminds me somewhat of who was and is to come, that type of thing. But also it talks about whereas we can use this Iye Ishe, Iye Asher Iye. I am what I am. I will be what I will be. I will create whatever I will create, or I am the existing one. So you can get all of these things out of this to be. Very good. Hey, Catherine Wynn, we have a winner there. She just said Joshua and Caleb. There we go. Good stuff. But this whole thing goes back to, who am I going to say that's sending me? And so I see here that Yah is saying, look, I'm the creator. I am the El Elyon. I am the God of gods. And this is where he's coming up. So the Ihye Asher Ihye is not the name of God, but more of an understanding of who he is, his nature, more of a title, like we have El Shaddai, we have El Elyon, we have all these different titles of Yah. This is more of a title, more of a kind of a nomenclature. Interesting enough, where Yeshua talks about in the Gospels, when he's arguing with the Pharisees, and he says, "Look, behold, a greater one than Abraham was, as I am. And he goes through and he uses this name again, this Ehiye. And so it's very interesting that we see God describing himself as his creator. So when he goes back to Pharaoh, he says, "Look, let my people go." It's a famous scene that we see in the Ten Commandments. We see Charlton Heston walk up to Yul Brynner, and he says, "Let my people go," and Yul Brynner says, who is this no-name God? Well, no, it wasn't a no-name God. They knew the name of God, but he describes him as the creator, helping him understand who Jehovah is. And it's this God of gods. And I think that's the whole purpose that we see. We'll talk about this maybe more and when we get into the plagues and everything, but it's a direct judgment of Yah, of the creator God, over these other deities that we see.
Don't give it away, Jeff. Don't give it all away. We'll get there when we get there. No, so
that's building up to that.
Right. You've got before Abraham was I am. That was a verse you were trying to reference there. Okay, but here's the thing. I'm sure you went over it all, but I just want to. You've got the always was, is, always will be, right? Yep. As you were referencing there. So when Moshe said this, because this wasn't for the Pharaoh's sake, this was for the Israelites. This was for the Israelites. Who should I tell the Israelites who sent me, right? And he's saying that, so the main two that I saw, and you brought up a lot of stuff, but the main two that sticks out to me that you brought up is the one who is. You've got that eternal being, right? The one who is, and you've got that phrase referencing in creation. The one who says, and it is so. So the one who is, and so it is, right? Yeah. And so, when they hear that, they get the reference, they know the creation story. Yeah. It's the one who says, and it happens, right? But more so than just creation. The one who says, and it is so. Right. Right? The one who is, and the one who's and when you start to think about the depth there, right? And of course, there's a stirring in the heart and in the spirit, right? When that's spoken. Who sent you? And, when they came and asked, "Are you Yeshua?" And he said, "I am." Yeah, he fell back before he responded a second time, right? Who do you search for, right?
They meet. I think there's one place where they're like ripping their clothes. They're like, "Hey, he just did blasphemy."
Oh, there's multiple times, but I'm talking about at the garden when he's praying. At the garden, when they come up, they said, "Are you Yeshua of Nazareth?" He said, "I am," and that's right. They fell back. Fell over. So that's my point. There is that stirring, that heaviness, much like in that situation. Moshe comes back to the Israelites, and in his mind he's like, "How am I going to even convince them?" All you have to do is speak the words I tell you, Moshe, and I will take care of the spiritual. Don't you worry about, you see what I'm saying? But we're showing some signs too. It's not just that it's left at that, but I guarantee you, at least in my opinion, I feel that it's a guarantee that there's a pricking of the heart. Like when Yeshua would speak and the Pharisees and the Sadducees would feel pricking in the heart. When Moshe comes back and says, "The one who is," and says it is so. Yeah. It's like the falling back with the Yeshua at the garden. Boom. Heavy. Right. I'm hitting myself a lot harder than some of you might realize, but I'm talking heavy hit. Yeah. Right. You get hit and you go, "Whoa." Yeah. The one who is and the one who says, and it is so. Yeah. You want to talk about trying to succinctly in a statement wrap up. This is how Yah, his perception of himself, and that he wants you to perceive, and he wants them to understand. Who's calling you? The one who is, and the one who says it is so, and it is so. Yeah. That's the character of Yah. Jeff, I mean, you gotta love the character and the finesse and the drama and the theatrics, but it's not drama in the terms of being dramatic so that it's unnecessary. This is, Yah has depth to it.
It's a wake-up call to the children of Israel that have walked away from his path, that have walked away and again culturally blended all these things in. We see there's some archaeological evidence that we see that they were eating pig. I saw that in some stuff. I was doing some research. So Israel had really kind of fallen back and kind of going into some places that they shouldn't have been. And all of a sudden, here's God saying, "Hey, look, who's sending you? God. Yah is, I am the creator." That's awesome.
Yeah. No, yeah. I wanted to get into that because I think a lot of people see that and especially in churchianity, you get the average answer in the pulpit is, I am. Well, he's existent. Okay, cool. And then you move forward. And it's like, Moshe said, who do I say sent me?
Yeah.
This is Yah's response. You have to stop and think about that for a minute. You have to let the depth hit you a little bit. You have to understand that there's going to be a stirring. If this doesn't, this is the beginning of the epic journey, Jeff. He's about to call his people out, Jeff. He's about to go into the wilderness.
Rallying cry right here.
I'm saying, Jeff, you can't. This is not playing around. Yah is not being dry. This is not a simple, I am that I am, and that's what he said. No, this is, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. This is about to get it going. You have to understand that in my eyes, this is like act one. We're starting. This is it.
He's not being Ned Flanders here, right? So
right, and you got to remember, Ned Flanders. You play with me, but I love that analogy, the Ned Flanders, because that's what I always think that the average person views Christianity, because it is, and that's what a lot of believers, whether they call themselves Christians or not. I know a lot of people don't like that word; they think it's a bad word now, even though the word Christian itself is not a bad thing, right? You can call yourself by an even better label and still be taking Yah's name in vain by making it common and thread. So it's not about the title here. I message you on Discord and Instagram if you have a second sometime during this week. Okay. I don't know how to check messages on Discord. I'll try to check on Instagram. I know that can be tricky too. Keep in mind, Mrs. Vader, I am very technologically challenged. Okay. So much so that, anyways, I'm very technologically challenged. Okay. Let's just say that if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. But I will look out for that. I don't know how to check messages on Discord. I haven't even been on Discord in so long. Since I did that collaboration, well, not collaboration, I was allowed to be on as a guest at the Enclosed Fellowship Cosmology Group. I went in there as a guest and did a video a little bit with them, got to join the discussion.
Just one more real quick thing on I Am Who I Am, the Ihye Asher Ihye. These also point out the valve pointers, just throwing it out there. But I did a whole series on the case for Yehovah, and that's one of the points that I bring out is this is actually pointing out the valve pointers in the name Yehovah. Anyway, just carrying on with that. That's just a side note.
Right. No, that's good stuff. Yeah. You gotta put it in there. If that is something that you see and you see as a point, then bring it up. We've been bringing up stuff, Jeff, and I hope that the chat. Usually our chat is very warm and welcoming. I know you and I both have said some things that I know there's some people in the chat are not going to like to hear. Sure. And you and I have no problems with disagreeing with people on things like this. But
sure.
I hope the chat's able to do the same. Again, if you think what we see as meat is bone, spit it out. But hopefully you're getting something out of this. Otherwise,
guys, look, there's stuff that Ian and I have agreed on. And we're still right here, just brothers and loving each other and studying the word together. That's the way it should be.
Okay, almost time to wrap it up, Jeff. We are on point with this, and I've got some things to say at the end of the video here for anybody who's listening in. There's something worth sticking around for. Okay, so God said, moreover, unto Moshe, thus say unto the children of Israel, Yahovah, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Avraham, the Elohim of Yitzchak, the Elohim of Yaakov has sent me unto you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial unto all the generations, right? So you get not just that heavy message that we brought up, but you also get the tying in of the generations there, the patterns that have been established, right? What are you laughing at me for?
I was saying, hold up, just one quick second. So, because we do have a lot of people that say that the I Am is God's name, but right here, as we get into this, was this verse 15? Then Yehovah Elohim of your fathers. So this is good. So it says, moreover, God said to Moses, Yehovah, this says you'll say it to the children of Israel, Yehovah Elohim of your fathers. Again, we don't see the Ihye Asher Ihye. Again, we see Yehovah right there, the Tetragrammaton. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I just want to point that out.
Right. Okay. So go and gather the elders of Israel. This is okay for anybody who likes to take notes that are often missed. Yeah. This is one that is often missed. Okay. And I'm going to be bringing this up again, probably in the next video. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, Yahovah, the Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Avraham, of Isaac and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared unto me, saying, I've surely visited you and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. Okay. Go get the elders, the ones who would have sat at the gate in Israel. right? The ones who sit in judgment, the ones who hear a matter out.
Right.
And I have said, and I will bring up you up out of the affliction of Mizraim, out of Egypt, unto the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, unto a land of flowing with milk and honey. And yes, there are some giants in those names that we mentioned.
Absolutely.
And they shall hearken to thy voice, and thou shalt come. So look, he's telling them right here. Jeff, do you see this? Because, okay, anybody who's doing this, anybody who's studying with us tonight and is planning on moving forward, if we didn't offend you to the point where you're disgusting and you want to kick us to the side and how dare us that we said something that you disagree with, and even if you're right and we're wrong, if you're willing to stick with us, right, on those little things that you might disagree with us on, here's an underline, here's a circle, here's a highlighter, okay, for anybody who wants to do that. Look at what Yah's saying. He says, they shall hearken to your voice. So go gather the elders of Israel, right? And there's multiple points I want to make with that. I'm going to hint for now and speak more next video.
Right.
And they shall hearken to your voice, and you shall come. Okay, so look, he's already told Moshe, you're going to bring him out. Not if, but when. He already told him, you're going to come back to this mountain and serve God. Not just come back to this mountain, but you are going to serve God. Right? Okay. You've got the you're going to come into the land. You're going to be given a land. There's going to be tribes there that the names Moshe is going to recognize, right? And look, they're going to hearken to your voice, and they will come. Okay?
Yes.
Keep that in mind, because there's going to be some moments where I think Moshe forgot he was told this. Okay, I'll leave that at that hint there. That's probably saying too much already for it to be a hint anymore.
Yeah.
But, okay, so down the elders of Israel unto the king of Egypt. Again, this verse 18 is often passed by, but look, go get the elders. They're going to listen to you. They're going to come. Yeah. Then you and the elders of Israel unto the king of Egypt. Jeff, every time we watch the movies, every time we watch the cartoons, every time we see this stuff, isn't it just Moshe and Aaron before the Pharaoh?
Right.
They have nobody else. They have no witnesses. They have no support. Right. They have no sponsorship. Right?
Yeah.
What is this verse saying right here, Jeff?
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at this.
He's got backup.
You and the elders of Israel.
Yeah.
Any raise of hands in the chat of who hasn't visualized elders behind Moshe and Aharon for at least the initial, if not every time, at least for the initial conversation and confrontation with the king or Pharaoh of Egypt. And ye shall say unto him, it says you and the elders, right? Yahovah Elohim of the Hebrews have met with us. Now let us go, we beseech thee. Okay, here's again, highlighter and underlining for something that was brought up in the chat earlier. And I told the people to wait. I said, wait, we'll get there. We beseech thee 3 days journey into the wilderness. Okay, so this is the original request. This kind of reminds me of other portions in scripture. When you look at like Nehemiah and stuff like that, you have the references there. Can't wait to watch this from the beginning, see how offensive it is. She's laughing. And Joyce says offended how? I'm not going to point out things because I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just saying that I know that there's some topics that Jeff and I have made some comments that are not so subtle on where we stand. And yes, we believe where we stand, but we're not saying that we think there's no chance that we're wrong about any of it, or that if you disagree with us or whatever. And we're very careful with trying to emphasize that. But even if we believe we can fellowship with others who disagree with us on all of those offensive points, we don't always see it on the other side. And so we're hoping that if you do disagree with us, that you're not taking it as a personal offense. We're sharing this as what we see. We're hoping that you gain from this, that you take it before Yah. If you disagree, take it before him. And if you still disagree after that, by all means, you can let us know stuff. We just like you, we've heard, just like you've probably heard our views. We've heard the other counter views, but that doesn't mean I won't hear them more. I listen to them all the time.
Absolutely.
But anyways, there's definitely some things that we've said that people might be offended by. Not that I think that they should be, because whether you disagree or not, I don't believe that should be offensive. But you can get turned off by things, right? You can feel disgusted, and well, if they don't know that, then I'm out of here. And I'm hoping that's not the case. But Yah's going to use this to reach who he wants, so I'm not too worried about it. I just don't want to lose friendships either, or fellowships. But it is what it is. So okay, so look at this. He says the original request is for Moshe and Aharon with the elders present. You and the elders of Israel go to the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, and request 3 days journey into the wilderness. And look at this, Jeff. Here comes here's the underlining and the highlighting stuff.
Yeah.
right? 3 days journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to Yahovah. Okay, we're going to pause. We're going to do it. We're actually going to talk about this for a couple minutes, Jeff.
We are. Okay, good.
I know a lot of times tonight I said, well, we'll push it, and you're probably like, man, he's going to push yet another one. No, we'll discuss this, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so the original request is 3 days journey. We're being shown a distance there. Hey, call back to Jonah on the 3 days journey, right? 3 days journey. And you've got the representation of 3 days and things like that too. 3 days journey into the wilderness, showing, look, we're going to be gone for some time because that's a one-way trip distance, 3 days journey, right? So you've got the going there. And with that request, it seems like there might be a return, right? I'm not saying that that's Yah's plans, but that is the original request. And that language, if you're a king, if you're the leader, if you're a boss, Jeff, I come up to you and say, hey, I need a 3-day weekend. No, that's not what I said. Let me retract that.
Yeah.
I come to you and Jeff.
I've got a 3 days journey. I got a
3 days journey where I have to go for a feast, Jeff. Is that okay? In your mind, you're going to be thinking, okay, 3 days there, 3 days back, time spent there. We're talking over a week, right?
Yeah.
So this is something you need to think about, but you're not thinking, I'm not coming back, right? That's kind of what that language indicates there. So if you disagree with me on that, Jeff, I want to hear it in 2 seconds.
Nope,
okay.
I don't.
Okay, so it says 3 days journey. So we've got distance calculation here. We've got time calculation here in the request. But we also have the purpose is to sacrifice unto Yahovah.
How did they know how to do that?
Well, there's that as well, Jeff. There's all kinds of things here. But look. Okay, Jeff, when people think of Exodus, right?
Yeah.
And if this verse is skipped, for whatever reason, because there's a lot in the scriptures, and whatever you're seeing, Yah's allowing you to see. So if you didn't see this verse, I'm not saying, oh, you missed it. I'm saying it wasn't meant, but now maybe it is meant, right? The purpose of the request was to go sacrifice. Okay, so yes, then obviously there's some instruction that will be, if not already. You and I both believe that instructions are already understood to some degree. Maybe they've forgotten some things. Maybe they haven't been keeping things, but we already see that with Abraham. You and I have mentioned that ordinances, statutes. We see Abraham had an understanding of Torah long before it was written in stone and given on top of a mountain. Whether people want to agree with that or not, it's simply put, that's what Scripture tells us. But we have the know to and the how to, but why? Look, they're asking for religious exemption.
Yep.
Jeff?
Yeah.
They're asking for religious exemption, right?
Yeah.
When you go to travel outside the country, at least back in the day, who knows what they do now? I haven't been outside the country in years. But usually when you go, you have your passport and they look at it and they check your ID and they do a little cool stamp thing and you're like, oh, I got another one on my passport. And they say to you, they ask you some questions, right?
Where are you going?
What is the reason for your visit?
Right.
That's one of the things that they will ask you out of protocol. Whether they're going to investigate further, whether they think that there's something suspicious or not, they want to know the reason, right? Well, the reason here is religious exemption. We want to go sacrifice unto Yahovah. All right, Jeff, I'm going to softball throw it to you, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. I think you're in agreement here, but do you personally believe at this time that not just in Yahovah's plans, but that it is indicating through Moshe that he would have understood, and I want to know if you think the Israelites would have understood this too, to be not just be a sacrifice, not just to be trying to get realignment with the Father, but to keep Pesach.
Well, yeah, I've never thought about that.
No.
Jeff.
I thought the midwife stool was going to be the one that throws you off. I didn't think this was going to be the one that throws you off.
I've not thought about that, but I can see that because going back to Isaiah 46:10, God declared it from the beginning. Yah already knows when they go out, they're going to be doing the Passover. So I can see that.
Okay, because often it's understood when people first start looking into this stuff, not always, but often it's understood of, well, it wasn't really a Passover. There wouldn't have been any of that until they would have put the blood over the lintel that we'll be going into in the videos to follow, and things like that. That's what made it the Passover, the angels passing over and things like that. But as you and I have discussed, even in our Genesis 4 study, that there would have been that understanding predating Abraham, of ordinances, statutes, Torah, things of this nature. So I'm going to propose that now, that it was going to be Pesach, even at this point. That I'm not saying that just because Yah's above time and space and knows where it's going.
Okay.
But that they would have understood that this is springtime.
Yeah.
They would have understood that this is the timing, and that they would have, at least those who remembered, and we haven't observed things in a while, but this would be the time of Pesach.
Yeah.
When we're told to call out during the springtime, the beginning of the Hebrew calendar, this would be Pesach. Okay. Now, I'm proposing it here.
Yeah.
I'm going to start putting nails in the coffin on this next video.
Okay.
Okay, right. Jeff? So
yeah, just to be transparent, I had always thought that they were going out to do like sin and guilt offerings.
Right. I think that's often the understanding. But
that's where it always was.
I'm going to put some nails in coffins, Jeff, but I'm not. Right. I'm not going to do it until we come across the verse. There's a lot of things
I'm down to listen to it.
Yeah. There's a lot of things we pushed aside for the verse. I want to wait until the verse so that everybody, especially those who are newcomers, Jeff. I know for a fact that there's a couple people who've hit me up saying that they want to tune in, and this might be the first time of ever going through Exodus for them. So we need to keep that in mind. I hope the chat keeps that in mind as well and tries to be gracious and not overbearing and overwhelming and things like that. Because Jeff and I are trying to throw as much as we can at this, and we're throwing a lot. And if you're brand new, receive what you can. Ask questions if you feel the need to. You can put them underneath the video and stuff like that. But if we say we're going to dive deeper into it in the following videos, trust we plan to do so. Okay, so I plan to hit that coffin hard, and I'm not even worried about making sure I know when it is, because the verses highlight in my brain. So when I see them, you're going to see it as I'm reading it, Jeff, and you're probably going to go, there it is. There it is. And some people in the chat too are probably going to be like, oh, snap. Okay, so let's tie this up, and then we can make some announcements and be done with this.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go. No, not by a mighty hand. Jeff.
It's already,
Just like Abraham with Sodom and Gomorrah being privy to knowledge and things like that.
Right.
Oh, you can argue with me, Karen. I got people in the chat saying the only thing I said was offensive was something about I give her trouble about cream in her coffee. Yeah, I tell her the only thing that belongs in coffee is honey. Okay, Karen says she believes the 3 days is a preparation period for Shavuot. I've heard her argument on this, and she's got some good stuff on that. And that doesn't go against the Passover thing either.
Right.
So she's actually got some heavy stuff on that, which is pretty good. Okay, just going through the chat real quick. Another proof that command and statutes existed prior to Sinai. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, Mrs. Vader's asking about the red on the door.
About we do that.
Well,
we do that.
Jeff, I want to wait to go over that for when we go over that. So I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm just saying we'll go over what we do and don't do, what you do, what you don't do, what I do, what I don't do, and things like that. When we get to that point, that'll be halfway through the series.
Sure.
So I shouldn't argue. You can argue with me, Karen. Everybody can argue with me. I'm just saying, try not to just walk away all upset if I say something people don't like. That's all. If I'm attacked at my door, the red might be with me. Okay. All right. So let's go here. So I'm sure that the king will not let you go. Look, Moshe's being allowed privy to knowledge here. He's being told that they're going to come out, that they're going to listen to him, things like that. You're going to come back to this mountain. You're going to serve me. You're going to do a sacrifice, right? He's being privy to all this knowledge. But look at what he's also telling Moshe. How many haven't caught this? Moshe is being told before going to the Pharaoh
that he's not going to listen.
That he's not going to listen, not by a mighty hand. And so Yah says, I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders, Jeff. So when we get to those plagues and things, we'll start discussing this verse, because there's a lot of things here that people don't seem to either realize or they forget. Moshe was told these things. Look, he was told ahead of time. The king's not going to just let you go when you first request it. Look, I'm going to stretch out my hand, outstretched hand, which all throughout Scripture, this outstretched hand and the outstretched arm can either be extremely positive or extremely negative, depending on where you sit with the Father, right? And smite Egypt with all my wonders, all my wonders. So Moshe already knows it's going to be a few things. Yeah. And if Yah says all my wonders, and he's speaking to him through a bush that's not being consumed by fire, you already know it's going to be intense, right?
Yeah.
All my wonders, which I will do in the midst thereof. Okay. And there's something to consider there too. In the midst thereof.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And after that, he will let you go. Look, it's not a pre-tribulation rapture of the Exodus, Jeff. We'll get there. Again, not trying to offend, but we will get there when we get there. I'm just making statements here. But whether you sit on that or not for eschatology, at the very least, you can't disagree with me on Exodus, right? They don't get to go until after everything's said and done. After that, he will let you go. And I will give this people, look at this, Jeff. Favor. I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. I don't know if the Hebrews necessarily were perceiving that. Again, just like the video I did last night, you need to. We're being told what Yah has planned from his perception, which is part of something we have to keep in mind for when Moshe seems to have seemingly forgotten these things that I'm trying to emphasize now at the end of this second half of the chapter 3 here. I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass that when you go, not if, you shall not go empty-handed. Just like how Esther believed that she shouldn't go empty-handed before the king, but rather present him and bring him before a banquet, right? And we can point to that in Torah, as well as respect to the authority, as well as to the person and things of that nature. Yah is telling the Israelites, when you go, you're not going to even go empty-handed. Jeff, Exodus, where chaos is going on, conspiracies are going on, children are being slaughtered, Moshe is being hidden and protected. Moshe's mother gets paid to nurse him while others are being thrown into the river by the choice of the parents due to mandates and things of this nature. All this chaos going on in the book of Exodus, Jeff. You have these plagues and these battles of the one true King of Kings, the one true God versus the lowercase g gods. You have all these different things going on. And amidst all of that, Yah says, I'm going to bring my people out. I'm going to bring you out, and we're going to get into covenant. I'm going to bring you out, and you know, we'll talk about some of the things that are proposed that are also negated and rejected by the Israelites at the very end of the study here. We'll make some hints there. But not only am I going to bring you out, but you're not going to be empty-handed. You are going to be favored in the sight of the Egyptians. Every woman shall borrow of her neighbor and of her that sojourneth in her house.
Stop. You can't go past that.
Okay, Jeff. All right.
You can't go past that.
I was going to bring it back, but okay, go for it.
Yeah, you can't go past that. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor. This is another sign and a wonder right here that Yah is saying, hey, look, who's the head of the house? Who is the one that has the ability to own land? Who's the one that has authority? It's the men. God says, look, I'm gonna be so powerful and so successful that your women shall be able to go and ask their neighbors, and they're going to be able to get the spoils out. That's a big deal. I think that's overlooked.
Well, here's the thing. Often that's argued, especially by your individuals that are the academic scholar types that lean away from where you and I sit with the Ramses and things like that.
Right.
They'll point to this and they'll say every woman shall borrow of her neighbor. Remember how I talked about the skeptical academics that are getting bigger nowadays, and they'll say, well, I mean, when we look at the Israelites being slaves, I mean, you know, we look at the documentation of these so-called slave workers, and they had it pretty good. They were working hard when they were building the Capitol buildings, and they're talking about, again, to reemphasize what we talked about hours ago in this video. They're not looking at the documentation of those that built the cities that the Israelites were instructed to build. They're not looking at the specific task, which if you're going to compare, shouldn't you be looking at what the documentation says of those individuals, not the individuals who are doing the other building? Because you can't to assume that the treatment is the same. I believe is not wise and not a fair assumption here. But they do that, and they point at this portion here, and they say every woman should borrow of her neighbor. And they say, look, the Israelites had it so good that they lived right next to Egyptians. Obviously, they didn't have it that bad. They're their neighbors. Jeff, I don't know if you're aware of that, but that's one of the arguments, you know? And so, you know, I mean, there's multiple ways of looking at that, but I think that's kind of real tongue-in-cheek with attitude there when you use that to argue that argument, okay? I see the mindset there, but I believe that there's a spirit that I don't like behind that. Whether or not the proximity of neighbor is to be in question here is beside the point. Okay, in my opinion, really. We have the Israelites calling out, and we see Yah saying that he sees the grievances and stuff. And the individuals who are pointing to this whole neighbor word and circling in and saying they didn't have it that bad are the ones who also don't believe that Yah heard prayers because they don't believe in Yah. I'm just saying, typically speaking. So you have to consider the source.
Can I address the neighbor thing just real quick?
Go for it.
We believe that they were in Avaris, right? There was also several other going up and down the Nile. I think there was about maybe three or four large um, gatherings of Israelites that were up and down the Nile. So when they're talking about their neighbors, they're not talking about like your next door neighbor. They're talking about neighboring cities, neighboring
Sure.
as they're coming up. Because we just get in our mind that, oh, it's just, whatever capital that you're thinking this happened in, right? Oh, that's where they are literally emptying out Egypt.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands, millions, right,
Millions.
of people coming
Millions.
out. And as they're going out, they're passing these neighboring towns. They're passing these neighboring cities or all this stuff. And so as they're going, that's when they're getting all this kind of stuff. That's when and people are like, wow, oh, they're going. It says that they gave them favor with them.
Well, here, Jeff, can I say this real quick?
Yeah.
This is me being tongue-in-cheek back at the skeptic academic who says that, because I don't like how they said that. They circled in and they said the Israelites didn't have it so bad. And I'm not sitting here going, again, as I mentioned before, I don't believe the Israelites had anything to do with building the pyramids. So I don't like how they do that in the cartoons and the movies and stuff. Right. But I really don't like when they try to lessen the burden here.
Right.
We don't see Yah saying, suck it up. We don't see Yah saying, you don't have it that bad.
Right.
Okay. We don't see Yah saying, I'm going to pull you out, but quit complaining about your situation in the terms of that there's no reason for you to complain.
Right.
Okay. We don't see that. Okay. First off. Second off, my response to the academic, especially that's the atheist who circles that word neighbor and says that they had it good. Who do you consider your neighbor, Jeff? Right? Didn't they ask Yeshua that? And who is your neighbor? Okay. And he gave them the parable of people from different towns. I'm just saying that I would leave it at that because they don't see it as anything else. But when they say who is the neighbor, I would say, and exactly that. Who is your neighbor? Right. Because it doesn't necessarily mean the person living right next door to you, right? Isn't that the whole point? Okay. Yeah. Look at this.
I like something that Karen said. If they didn't have it so bad, why did Yah hear their crying? I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's the thing. Okay. And there's some great head knowledge, right, out there. And even the atheists, right, have some good things to say. There's some very intelligent atheists out there. David Roll, that we're talking about tonight, he's not a believer. I think he falls under agnostic. He believes in the whole, I can't say for sure. I just, whatever. But yeah, I mean, to try to take away from the pain here that is mentioned, when we get into the instructions further on about Peshach and what the foods represent, we have bitter herbs, salty water, tears of Israel. We'll get there when we get there, Jeff. But yes, simply put, if they didn't have it so bad, why did Yah hear the crying? Exactly. Well, succinctly put, they've got this this bitter spirit, and they don't want to believe it's so bad. They've got some wonderful head knowledge, but a lot of times knowledge puffeth up, right? Isn't that right? Yeah. Knowledge puffeth up.
Yeah, if you watch the first part of that Exodus video, you have the guy on the talk show. I forget some rabbi on the left coast. That's he's like, yeah, he's a rabbi. He's like, the Exodus didn't even happen like it says it in the book. He says it's not true. He said, but it doesn't have to be true for you to have faith in it.
Oh, I know that video you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, and it just hurts my heart because that's where we see people are at. They would rather hold to their traditions and hold to their atheistic beliefs while trying to be religious and trying to believe, be a Jewish believer, but at the same time rejecting Moshe. Gosh, how do you? Okay, let's not even talk Messianic or Christian. How can you consider yourself a believer in Yehovah or Hashem, however whatever you want to say there? How can you call yourself a believer in the God of Israel if you don't even believe in Moshe? If you don't even believe any of that happened? God lied through the whole book. Well, I don't get that.
Well, that's the thing. It's more about a culture for them, Jeff. Typically, the ones that are going of that mindset, and a lot of the so-called Orthodox Jews fall on that line side.
Leading rabbis don't believe the book.
I know, Jeff. I know, and we're told in Scripture that would happen. But look, there comes a day of reckoning. Okay, there comes a day where everybody has to accept, whether you like it or not, what the truth is. Okay. But at the end of the day, it really comes also down to relationship. This is why you and I like to emphasize this.
Right.
You don't get to question whether the Bible has any validity and if it should be considered a historical book or if it's a work of fiction that is just orally handed down as if people like to talk bad about themselves and talk about how they're constantly betraying their covenant with their own God. Let's not even go into the you can be an atheist all you want, but you can't dismiss that these are actual individuals. Moshe, Yeshua. You're being historically dismissive on purpose at that point. You're choosing to be ignorant to say that these are not even true individuals.
Honest.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, there's a spirit there. There's a rebellion there.
Yeah.
Why atheists say that there is no God, and then they talk about how they hate him. So, but we're gonna move forward, Jeff. Okay, to finish this up. And of her that sojourneth in her house. Yeah. Oh, right. Oh, interesting. Jewels of silver, jewels of gold, and raiment. And you shall put them on your sons and upon your daughters, and you shall spoil the Egyptians. And this verse is going to come back a few times in this study.
Yeah.
And we might even make some references to things that go beyond this study. Right, Jeff? What happens to that gold and stuff like that?
Right.
But that's unless
what
you have
happens to the garments.
Right. Yeah.
Or what doesn't happen to the garments.
Right. No, these are all good points.
Yeah.
So that is the end of the part of this portion. Jeff, do you have any closing statements before I make some announcements and we let these people go?
I appreciate everybody, and I appreciate people with differing views. I do think it's great to hear opposing views. I listen to things all the time, and I encourage other people to listen to things all the time, and just study for yourselves and go through things. We're definitely not trying to offend tonight or anything like that, but we are trying to get across some points that are probably not heard that well during this day and time. So that's I just want to throw that out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some things that we sped through. There's some things that we pushed, and a lot of the things that we pushed will come back to. What's going to happen, Jeff? We're going to get off of here, and you and I are going to be like, there was some notes that we didn't go over that we wanted to go over.
I have some notes writing.
Say what?
I have some notes, but yeah.
Oh, did you want to hit them real quick?
No. I think y'all had us go through what we needed to go through tonight.
Okay. Is there any chance that you think that you'll be able to attach them unforceably, fitting wise in other videos?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, then we'll make a notation of the ones that you didn't get to go on, and maybe we'll get to bring them up in further videos. Okay. So here's the thing. I haven't decided on all of my wife and I were discussing today. We haven't decided on all the specifications. So for tonight, I'm going to keep it real simple.
Yeah.
We have stuff, Jeff. We have shirts. We have CDs. We have DVDs. We have books. I'm not talking about stuff that's in my bookshelf that I don't want anymore. I'm talking about stuff that's brand new that I bought that I haven't touched.
Yeah.
So when I say books, I mean they haven't been opened. There's no binding with notes and bent corners that I'm trying to just give away. Right. These are books that we have bought to give away, and thus they have not been opened. They have not been touched. DVDs still have the saran wrap on them. CDs still are in the thing. Okay, so this is. I'm not trying to. My point is, this is good giveaway stuff, not just me trying to cleanse my house. Okay, so we have books, DVDs, all kinds of little information, little things that we've accrued from many ministries that we've bought and taken and stuff like that, and said, okay, we're gonna do this as part of ministry giveaways. And the idea was originally to use that as a means to push the cheerful givers page, right? But I can't seem to get a team going for that. So until I can, I'm not going to do a giveaway for that. So we're going to do a giveaway for this video series.
Okay.
Now, my wife and I haven't decided if it's going to be one person, 3 people, 5 people, maybe up to 7. It depends on how many people join in and things like that. But what I do have in mind is that after all is said and done, after the whole series that we do on this, we're going to allow the people who get chosen based on an unbiased system. We're not going to just pick people we like or whatever, anything like that. We'll do the drawing out of the hat or something like that, right? So that we don't get to choose. We'll choose.
Right.
We're going to let them choose out of what we have of what they want. Okay.
Nice. Okay.
And so there's going to be all kinds of stuff. I mean, we've got like the Genesis Rob Skiba book. We've got the What Does the Bible Say About the Earth Chad Taylor book. We've got a Chad Schaefer, The World Under the Bondage of Egypt book. We've got multiple CDs, DVDs. I've got some other books I'm not even thinking of, but usually when I buy a book that I really like, I buy doubles. We've got the How to Eat Clean by like Yeshua by what's his name? Andy Hoy. We've got things. We've got stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's gonna be the deal. I haven't decided on all the rules yet, but my wife and I were thinking something along the lines of because this is something we can keep in count of without being too hectic and not demanding too much. We're gonna ask this: that if you want to be considered in the drawing for these giveaways, we're gonna ask that you comment under the video on every single video. Now, listen, don't stop right there. The comment, and this doesn't mean you have to watch it live, but it does mean you're gonna have to watch it at some point in order to make this comment, because we're not gonna ask that you just go in there and say, hey, and that's it, okay? The comment has to be what you enjoyed best from the video. And then if you have something that you disagree with, we'd like to hear what it is and why,
Sure.
But it has to be coupled with something you like. Okay.
Yeah.
In order for the comment to count, you have to put something in here you like. And I'm not saying we need to pat on the backs and stuff, but if you're going to give us criticism and disagree with stuff, surely something in the past 3 hours, other than the intro video, is worth saying, yeah, that was okay. Okay. Just saying you like the intro video. I'd like to hear about that too. Cause my wife would like, I think it'd be good for her to get the encouragement because she did put a lot of time and effort into that.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy. And she's not very comfortable with speaking Hebrew. So for, it was one of those, I told her how to pronounce, I told her how to pronounce each one. I'm very familiar with the Psalms 51 song. I can sing that in Hebrew just fine.
Yeah.
But for her, she got the crash course in 20 minutes today. Okay. So for any Hebrew experts that might say, well, she said, what was it? Hashava lesason yisheha. It sounds like she said yeshaha, said yishaha, or what? Any kind of little tidbit people want to try to.
She's from Galilee. Leave her alone. She's a redneck out there.
She got the 20-minute crash course, number one. 20-minute crash course.
Yeah.
From me, who's not a Hebrew expert. Number two. Number three, not only was it a 20-minute, I loved how she did it, so I have no problems with it. So I really don't want to hear anybody's negative comments on that. I really don't. But if you have something that you disagree with about the video, you can definitely voice it. I'd like to hear things. And please explain why. Don't just say, you guys are wrong about this and that's it. And, put a little pointers in there. If you write 3-4 paragraphs, I may or may not read the whole thing, depending on the attitude that I see in the writing, just being blunt with it. Yeah. But to be considered for this giveaway, we want to see at least one good thing that you enjoyed, that you received. Extra points if it's something that you felt you learned, okay? To be coupled with something you don't like. In order for the you don't like comment, it has to be coupled with something you did like, other than the intro video. But I would like to see some encouragement if you enjoyed the intro video for my wife, because I was so like, it was 10 times better than I thought she was going to be able to do. I was like, this is exactly what I wanted, and you did it in like a matter of a couple hours. It's amazing. So that's going to be the rule. I'm not going to give a rule of you must like or subscribe or follow or whatever. Have you seen that guy who does the video game thing that he goes, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. You can follow if you like. You don't know what I'm talking about? No, but you know the song that he's referring to, right? Yeah. He did the like and subscribe. And he sings it obnoxiously for minutes. And it's in my head all the time because my wife does video games and stuff. And I'm like, man, that's so annoying, but advertisingly brilliant that he did that, So we're not going to ask that people have to like and subscribe or anything like that. There's no way that I'm going to try to bother with it. We're not going to ask that people have to share it or anything like that. It'd be nice if you do it, if you like it. Yeah. But the one rule I have for right now, and we might add to it, we'll see, is that you have to comment under the video. And it has to be a comment that tells us something that you enjoyed or learned. And then if you'd like to couple that with some criticism or something you disagree with or whatever, we'd like to hear that too. Because, these videos are not just for me and Jeff to share what we believe and understand, and so that you guys can grow and that we can grow from our hashing it out, but we want to hear from you guys too. This is our chance for fellowship on our end as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hey, Ian, if you like, I'd be happy to throw a book in. So we'll toss your book in there. So that's the rule for now. Okay. We have t-shirts. I don't know if I mentioned t-shirts, but we have t-shirts as well. Yeah. So if the first place, second place, third place picked winner or whatever down the line, if all the books are taken, which we have a lot of books, so I doubt that's going to happen. If you want a shirt instead or whatever, we'll figure it out. The Miss Vader asked if I'm on Instagram, and I am. I thought I tried to type it in, but I think the chat thing gets it out, but it's at Brandonator or at Brandonator. So yeah, there we go. That's my Instagram. I don't
Brandonator.
Brandonator. Yeah.
You might have to put that in the comments under the video or something if you can't do live chat. I forgot about that.
Yeah, let me just, I'll just type it without the at symbol. There we go. Throw an at in front of that if it pops up. There we go.
Do you put it in the private chat? Because I don't see it.
Oh, I put it in
if you put it in the comments underneath, that works fine too. It's whatever. Oh, there we go. Okay, I see you on there.
There we go.
Okay.
Yep. Just put an at in front of that. There we go.
Control C, and we'll do I'll do you like this here. Right. I'll do it like this, and we'll do it like this.
There we go.
That would be the Instagram account for Jeff there.
Yep, that's my private. That's my personal one. I don't have one for the Way Remnant, but there we go.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I'll find out what it is. I'll put it in the comments. There we go.
Do you have it linked with your Facebook?
I do. It's linked with my Facebook. So.
There you go. Okay.
Yep.
And like I said, you can always put it in the comments and in the video underneath.
Oh, she found it. There we go.
All right. Okay, so you guys heard it here. What you need to do if you're interested in giveaways, books, DVDs, T-shirts, Jeff's book, things like this. So we want to hear back from you guys. And this is my way of trying to encourage that.
Hey, and I just want to say thank you to all the people that was listening tonight, man. Great comments, great spirit with everybody. I just love it. We have a really good audience over here. Good stuff.
I know we've been very blessed. I try not to acknowledge it too much because I'm afraid that acknowledging it is going to, not jinx. I don't believe in jinx, but you know what I mean? It's one of those, you don't even want to say it, but no, it's true. It's true. We have been very blessed here at Draw Nigh to the Creator series. Since day one, maybe not everybody agrees with everything in the chat, but the trolls are basically non-existent.
Yeah.
And people are very warm and welcoming and loving, and it's a very much of a fellowship thing. It feels very much like what I would want a church environment to be, and that's exactly what this is supposed to be, right? It's a church, it's ecclesia, it's the body coming together, even when we disagree on some points that Jeff and I brought up tonight, right? Because we don't see that as a division thing. Okay, so if you're good, Jeff, I'm about to do the outro and call it a night.
That's it, man. I'm good. It's all good. Can't wait for the next series.
Okay,
and talk about that. These are going to be.
I was just about to, because you reminded me. No, you can do it if you want.
Yeah. So guys, we're going to be filming these live on Saturdays and Sundays. Just also let you know, I was talking to Miranda, and I think that during this, because it'll be 2 programs a week that we're going to be doing, I think that we're going to pause our way over at the Way Remnant, our tour Tuesday, until we get done with this. So yeah, and hey, Ms. Vader, congrats on the 300 subs. I think we're at 310 before we started the program tonight. So excited about that. I've got a couple books going to be heading out to some folks, so we're real blessed. This has been great. And again, we're going to be doing these videos live on every Saturday and Sunday night. Looking forward to that. So make time, if you can, join with us, because listen, we pay attention to the comments, and I think tonight there were a couple comments that made it as points into the message tonight, and so I encourage that. And guys, listen, if this is your first go around with Passover, Pesach, if this is your first time going through this, this is a place that you can learn and get a lot of understanding of why we do things the way we do them, and it'll make more sense than if you just go through the motions with a Passover feast and you don't really know what's going on. This will really drive home meaning, and I think it'll help you understand why both of our favorite feast happens to be Passover. So
Passover is amazing. And for anybody who's wondering, because we've had people ask this, so I'm going to clarify and emphasize, and we might do this every video. When we get to the video where we discuss the actual passing over and then the instructions, there is a portion of within the first 14 chapters of Exodus where we're actually given the instructions on how to observe Passover, and for who it's for, and when it's for, and if it expires, and things of that nature are all in there. So when we go over those instructions, that is going to be the video. That's the video I was thinking, Jeff, where we would really sit down. And interestingly enough, when I did the outline, and I was like, man, you're cutting this one short. That's one of the videos that's like got the really shortest amount.
Right.
And I kept feeling like, I was telling me like, no, you are going to be on that just as long as the other videos. Yeah. And so when we hit that portion in the series, about halfway through the series, we're going to be discussing, I don't want to say the do's and the don'ts, right? But we're going to be discussing what we've seen work in our own lives, the differing ways to do things. We're going to try to not to be biased on things. So we're going to show you what we believe and agree on and what we think on things. But we're also going to be giving some examples of things that maybe we don't do, or timing that we don't do, but others do, understanding that we don't have everything 100% accurate all the times. And it's good to, especially for someone new, to give them the option so that they can choose for themselves. You know, I like to give the multiple things. You know, that's why I like to give up even the good points for the Ramseys, even though I strongly disagree on the Ramseys thing. Anyways, okay, so yeah, if you're interested if you know, I know we've had some people who said they wanted to listen in for the first time, that they're doing Passover for the first time this year.
That's amazing.
If you're antsy on the edge of your seat, saying like, I want to know what we need to do and stuff like that, we will go through it. And if you're curious about how to go about it, and you want tips and things, you know, this will be, I misspoke in the last video when we discussed this, Jeff. This will be my wife and I's 9th Passover, not the 8th. This will be our 9th Passover this year. So we're just one shy, after we keep this one, of a decade. So it's not like we're the most experienced or anything, but we have done it enough times to where some things have changed. And there's certain things that we do a little bit differently now. And we emphasize more on certain things than other things. And that will give us a chance to discuss it. So if you're interested in that, we will go over that in the video. If you're just interested in the deep study of the first 14 chapters, hopefully this series will do it for you. So we've got a giveaway. We've got things coming up ahead. And out of all the videos, I think this might be the one that we are least prepared for. So if you felt that this one didn't have as much oomph as what you're hoping for, maybe the other ones will have it. Hopefully.
Oh man, there were some good nuggets in here tonight. This was good.
I think so too. But you know how I am with things.
Okay,
so we're gonna cut it off with the new outro. Last statements. Any last closing? Okay, we're good to go. All right, thank you for joining Jeff and I tonight. Draw to the Draw Night of the Creator series here at Take on the World TV, where there are many channels, many sub channels, many shows to consider. You got SITREP, and you know, Chris is doing a couple other shows too. And you got the Closed Cosmology, you got the music show. He's got something else he's doing too.
I caught the 70s music show. Man, that was
that was actually pretty cool. That was
something
that
I didn't realize was 70s music, and I'm like, wow.
He brought up that turn in Ecclesiastes 3, and I was like, no way.
Oh yeah,
no way.
One of my favorite was the He's Alive, and I didn't realize that was all the way back then. Man, so good stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so stuff to look forward to, some stuff to consider. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope Yah used this video to bless you, to guide you. And I hope that he keeps you according to his will, that he Panesh to Panesh makes his face shine upon you, blesses you and keeps you according to his will. Thank you for coming to us tonight. We love you guys. Thank you for joining us. But remember, Yah created you. Yah loves you most. Shalom.
Honeni Elohim. Honeni Elohim.